Chapter 1152. The fatal attraction of the holy beast's blood caused a stir in the jungle, and several huge spirit beasts near Fire Peak were alarmed. This smell. A giant ape king with 2 arms wreathed in spirit fire licked its thick lips. It was already drooling, as if it had smelled 1,000-year-old honey peach. A second-class giant flaming arm ape king, a second-class blood claw python king, dozens of third-class spirit beasts, and hundreds of fourth-class and fifth-class spirit beasts. Loopy Toad sensed the changes in the jungle. As long as it could control these spirit beasts, it would be enough to put on an act. Little Silver and Loopy Toad working together could easily deal with these spirit beasts. The second-class Ape King and Python King that had been the first to rush over were subdued on the spot. Loopy Toad used the Python King's body, which was tens of meters long, as a rope to tie it up tightly. Exalted Immortal, spare us. The 2 second-class spirit beasts were completely stupefied. They never expected a holy beast and a quasi-holy beast to appear here. Furthermore, one of the quasi-holy beasts was King Greenfurred Akita that had taken human form. It had to be known that they had been cultivating for 1,000 years, but had yet to reach the stage where they could take human form. 10 minutes later, everyone from number 60 high saw birds circling in the jungle in front of them and 10,000 beasts scurrying about. The numerous spirit beasts led by the second-class Ape King and Python King ran around Wong Ling. They weren't in the mood to fight, and were purely going through the motions. Wong Ling knew that this group of spirit beasts had to have been arranged by Little Silver and Loopy Toad. He had smelled Little Silver's holy beast blood earlier, and now he had run into this group of spirit beasts that shouldn't have been in the area. Now, they were suddenly running around one after another, and he instantly understood the situation in front of him. It was very obvious that Little Silver and Loopy Toad had forced this group of spirit beasts to act as extras. Wong Ling sighed in his heart at how hard it was for them to act as extras. They were running around randomly, and they had to keep their numbers in check. If they all rushed over in a swarm, it was very likely that the area would be judged to be at risk of a beast tide. There was a beast tide on 9 Dragon Mountain from time to time, but the average probability of it happening was about once every 3 months. It was extremely dangerous to travel through a beast tide, and the command center would definitely send people to investigate the cause of the beast tide. If that was the case, then there was no need for it at all. Fortunately, under Little Silver's and Loopy Toad's directions, these spirit beasts moved in an orderly manner and didn't raise any suspicions in the command center. The number of spirit beasts in the surroundings gradually increased, and the originally boring jungle exploration finally seemed a little more interesting. In fact, it didn't matter if there weren't any spirit beasts around them, they survived by eating spirit fruits and berries in the forest. But in that situation just now, there hadn't been any spirit beasts around them at all, so it seemed a little fake. After another half an hour or so, everyone from number 60 high successfully reached Fire Peak. To their pleasant surprise, there were no signs of a camp yet. In other words, number 60 high was the first to arrive. We're actually the first. Superchin felt a little incredulous. The Ape King and Python King, who were running through the jungle, felt bitter inside. Under Little Silver and Loopy Toad's coercion, apart from agreeing to help put on a show, they had also taken on the job of interfering with the competition. They each sent out a lot of little apes and pythons from their caves to interfere with the other teams planning to station at Fire Peak. Thus, when the people from number 60 high school arrived, Fire Peak was very clean. On the other side, with the cooperation of the command center, General Bai led the mahjong players into the area where human devil Xiao Lixing was suspected to be active. There were no students in this area, they had all been driven away by the instructors in the jungle. Human devil is here. The old devil stared at the traces of withered spirit plants on the ground. Only Xiao Lixing had the terrifying ability to wantonly snatch away life. As they moved forward, they felt the power of death and withering that human devil brought with him. General Bai gazed at the footprints on the ground, each of which carried a deathly stillness. This was where human devil had walked. If you walked on these footprints again, the cells in your body would instantly wither and die, as if they had been exposed to radiation. He's stronger. The old devil stared at the footprints on the ground, and couldn't help looking worried under his mask. How is it compared to your previous fight? General Bai asked. It's very tricky. The old devil shook his head slightly and said bluntly, when we fought back then, it was only the places he touched that would wither and grow old. Now, this widespread decay just proves that Xiao Lixing's holy demon suppressing strength is gradually reaching great success, and is close to perfection. Suddenly, the old devil's expression turned increasingly frightened. Not good. What did you think of? The holy demon suppressing strength can help him absorb the souls of all living things and devour their cells. There are natural phenomena on 9 Dragon Mountain every day, such as the rainbow mist. If this person devours all living things on 9 Dragon Mountain, and then uses the natural phenomena on 9 Dragon Mountain to wait for all living things to recover before finally devouring them. In this way, it'll go on and on. When the old devil said this, everyone present shuddered a little. If this was really the case, then this would be the legendary perpetual motion machine. Devouring all living things that he had already devoured. General Bai really hadn't thought of this before. We have to get rid of human devil Xiao Lixing as soon as possible. General Bai was now well aware of the seriousness of the situation. Although this area had already been sealed off, human devil Xiao Lixing had already become their top priority. What was worse was that they hadn't found any traces of human devil after coming here. This was an absolutely cunning enemy. If they didn't get rid of him, they were afraid that things would change. General Bai contacted the command center again. Calling the command center. We haven't found any trace of human devil Xiao Lixing. Requesting a new location. The truth was that at that moment, a black shadow was quietly following Wang Ling. After human devil's revival, he urgently needed a young and vigorous body to replenish himself, and the people Xiao Lixing was targeting were none other than the 10 people from number 60 high school. To be precise, his main target was Wang Ling. For some reason, Xiao Lixing felt that the aura of this dead fish-eyed teenager's body was exceptionally delicious, and far surpassed that of his peers. Although they were all of the same age here, there was still a fundamental difference between their bodies. As a young man who had developed morally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically, the reason why Wang Ling's flesh was so good was very simple. It was because Wang Ling slept early and got up early, didn't drink beverages, and never stayed up late. Chapter 1153. Human devil Xiao Lixing indeed lived up to his reputation. The highest realm of devour everything wasn't to devour, but to fuse with everything. When the holy devil suppressing strength was cultivated to the extreme, Xiao Lixing could easily turn himself into a shadow and lurk in the shadows of all living things, waiting for the right moment to strike. This kind of covert action was usually hard to detect. But it was usually the case. The truth was that Wang Ling had noticed Xiao Lixing the moment he set his sights on number 60 high. It was just that he didn't know that the person following him was the legendary human devil Xiao Lixing. After all, Wang Ling hadn't been born when Xiao Lixing had stirred up trouble in the world back then. But times had changed, and the present was different. Who could have thought that one day, a baby who was invincible from birth would appear in the world? Furthermore, the parents of this family were crazy enough to prepare for a second child. In fact, it wasn't just Wang Ling who had noticed Xiao Lixing. Fang Xing, Wang Zhen, Lu Qingyi, Gu Xuanji and Jin Yuan had also noticed him. But seeing that Wang Ling wasn't moving, they weren't in a hurry to make a move. In the next moment, they communicated with each other in a mental space constructed from their thoughts. I sense malice behind me. Should we think of a way to get rid of it? Wang Zhen asked. He was used to being beaten up by his parents since he was young, so he was especially sensitive to malice. He knew as soon as Xiao Lixing appeared, and he quickly thought of a countermeasure. For a spell like Xiao Lixing's, which relied on devouring to strengthen itself, ordinary attacks were definitely ineffective. They had to be used in conjunction with a mental attack to inflict serious damage to its soul. But Ling Jinren hasn't made a move yet. I think we shouldn't worry about it for now. In any case, this person isn't much of a threat, he's just an annoying mosquito. Lu Qingyi shook her head slightly. Devouring spells might seem tricky, but in fact, in the upper world of the domain of the gods, this kind of spell was child's play. Nowadays, cultivators who used the devouring spell to strengthen themselves mostly had unstable foundations, were strong on the outside but weak on the inside, and couldn't withstand a single blow. I also think that Ling Jinren definitely has a deeper reason for not making a move. Why don't we leave him alone and observe him for now? Jin Yuan also nodded and expressed his opinion in the mental chat space. My Crimson Flame Ruler Mirror is miraculously effective against this type of demonic spell. If necessary, it can directly wipe this devil off the map without leaving the slightest trace. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Don't worry, Immortal. I just checked the Heavenly Dao list and discovered that Xiao Lixing is on the Heavenly Dao wanted list. Since he would soon be punished by the Heavenly Dao for harming living beings, it didn't matter if he was left alone. He'll disappear sooner or later, Gu Xuanji added at this moment. He was the keeper of order in the universe and knew the names of every evil person. Even though Xiao Lixing's criminal index was very high in this world, he wasn't even in the top 100 on the Heavenly Law wanted list. Thus, when Gu Xuanji found out the human demon Xiao Lixing's wanted index, he instantly lost interest in Xiao Lixing. He was just an ant that could be crushed at any time. How could he be more important than the match before him? On the other side, Xiao Lixing also felt very confused. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that something was off. He felt like he had already been discovered. But these people in front of him were just students from a high school cultivation school. Xiao Lixing really didn't believe that he had already been discovered. They were just a bunch of Foundation establishment cultivators, how could they possibly discover him? It had to be an illusion. He was extremely confident in the holy devil suppressing strength, and logically speaking, it was unlikely that he would be discovered in such a well-hidden environment. But now, Xiao Lixing was a little doubtful about his actions. Thus, he didn't make a move right away, but planned to observe for a while longer. Then, the scene became very strange. At that moment, 6 people in number 60 high knew of Xiao Lixing's existence. But as a grand human demon, Xiao Lixing didn't know that he was already being watched by 6 people. As evening approached, number 60 high occupied a pretty good position on Fire Peak. Wang Ling, Hero Gua, Super Qin and Xia Ming were in charge of cutting down trees and gathering wood to set up a temporary camp. Li Yuyue and Lu Qingyi were in charge of starting a fire and cooking. Wang Zhen, Gu Xuanji, Jin Yuan and Fang Xing were in charge of gathering spirit plants and hunting. Hunting was not a difficult task for them. Furthermore, given that Little Silver and Loopy Toad had given the go-ahead, the second-class Python King and the second-class Ape King from earlier were also in charge of helping hunt in the jungle and then sacrificing their prey to number 60 high. Thus, number 60 high's food that night was exceptionally rich. In addition to the spirit fruits and berries they had gathered on 9 Dragon Mountain, Wang Zhen and the others also caught a wild 4th-class flame yak, which was enough for the 10 of them to eat. 4th class. How did you catch it? Li Yuyue felt it was inconceivable. She had thought that catching a few pheasants would already be amazing enough. They could actually eat beef on the first day of the survival battle, it wasn't that hard. We hadn't even taken a few steps when we saw this guy already lying on the side, on his last breath. To end Brother Yak's pain, I went up and stabbed him, said Wang Zhen. Li Yuyue, on the other side, the camp had already been set up. Wang Ling actually hadn't helped much, since Super Chen and Hero Gua had been too enthusiastic. After cutting down the trees, they had used their spirit swords to cut the trunks into long strips, and then carefully shaved off the rough bark. The bark was very dry and could also be used for living. They then gathered a lot of banana leaves to cover the top of the tents. Just like that, 2 temporary tents were set up, one for boys and one for girls. This really is a real-life version of Minecraft. Exciting. Super Chen's forehead was covered in sweat, but it was hard to hide his excitement. After the 2 tents were set up, everyone looked at the huge numbers projected above the domed mountain peak. Survivors remaining, 678, another 70 people had been eliminated. Tonight, 2 people will patrol the sentry posts, and will change shifts every hour. After giving instructions, Lotus Sun started to use some of the spirit plants Wang Jin had gathered to make medicine. "Don't you need tools?" Wang Jin asked. "Of course." After saying that, Lotus Sun opened Mysterious Sea's sword spirit space and took out a luxurious multifunctional automatic pill-making machine. This was a machine designed purely for dummies. You just needed to pour spirit plants and herbs into the machine, and it would automatically filter them and then quickly turn them into pills according to your needs. It was much more convenient than using an alchemy furnace. Furthermore, this automatic pill-making machine was exclusive to Huaguo Water Curtain Group. Is that even possible? Everyone was stupefied. The headmasters in the command center were also collectively astonished. "Didn't you say that being able to bring in something means you have the ability, and it doesn't count as cheating?" Lotus Sun smiled shyly. In fact, there was a compressed luxury villa capsule in her sword spirit space. She just needed to throw it on the ground, and a villa would be built in an instant. But on second thought, she felt that her operation might be a little overboard and destroy the game's balance, so in the end, she didn't take it out. But in essence, as long as Wang Ling was around, number 60 high school, this balance would always be broken. Chapter 1154. At night, the temperature on 9 Dragon Mountain plummeted. Standing at the top of Fire Peak and looking into the distance, Wang Ling saw that a lot of places were actually frozen over and even snowing. It was a completely different world from Fire Peak. Fire Peak was surrounded by a tropical climate. It was extremely hot during the day, but just right at night. So in theory, Fire Peak was an ideal place to set up camp. But the people from number 60 high school never expected that after they set up camp here for so long, no one would come to fight them for territory. The plummeting temperature in the distance blended with the warm air here, and the temperature difference instantly created a large white mist around 9 Dragon Mountain. It was like a song of ice and fire. It was more dangerous to act at night than during the day, but the truth was that as long as one was good at using the white mist as cover, the success rate of a sneak attack would greatly increase. So Wang Ling was wondering if someone was going to take advantage of this opportunity to launch a night attack on them. But whether or not there was a night attack, Wang Ling didn't care at all about the attack itself. To him, this competition was just a game to pass the time. He didn't take it seriously, nor did he intend to use his spiritual senses to spy on the enemy. He would just let nature take its course. At that moment, there was a violent whistling sound as Wang Ling felt something heavy fall on the back of his head, followed by the crisp sound of a collision. Achim, someone was sneaking up on him. But Wang Ling had already sensed this person's presence earlier on. Wang Ling had thought that he might be able to trigger the Golden Talisman's life-saving effect with this blow, fall down, and wait for the teachers to rescue him before leaving the competition as soon as possible. But unfortunately, because that light blow just now was far from fatal to Wang Ling, the fatal effect hadn't been triggered. The person who had attacked Wang Ling was none other than Zhu Hanyun, the team leader of Titan High School. This was a precise blow aimed at the back of Wang Ling's head. Judging from the strength of the swing, it should have been enough to trigger the Golden Talisman's fatal judgment without the other party noticing. But Wang Ling just scratched his head without any movement. Behind him, Zhu Hanyun was stupefied and instantly on guard. This person, there was something wrong, Zhu Hanyun was extremely astonished as he thought this. When he had hit Wang Ling with the oar just now, not only had Wang Ling not been injured, Zhu Hanyun's own hand had gone numb. Retreat. In a moment of desperation, Zhu Hanyun used the sound transmission spell to send a signal, and Titan High School, which had been preparing to besiege number 60 High School, immediately withdrew from the front line. The truth was that at the foot of Fire Peak, several high schools had already joined hands to encircle and annihilate number 60 High. Titan High had been sent out as the vanguard, but they hadn't expected to receive Zhu Hanyun's order to retreat not long after they went up. Titan High School, South Sea Sky High School, Northern Fist High School, and West Leg Tyrant High School formed a temporary cultivation school alliance to inquire about the situation. What happened? Senior brother is injured. Titan High's junior sister Yen Xiaochun helped Zhu Hanyun down from 9 Dragon Mountain. How did it happen? South Sea Sky High immediately sent a medical student over to check on Zhu Hanyun's injuries. Right arm, fractured bone. You need to quickly bandage it and stabilize it. Otherwise, there might be repercussions. Fractured bone. Nan Ishio, the squadron leader of South Sea Sky, frowned deeply. Zhu Hanyun's body was extremely dense. For such a physique to show signs of bone fractures, it was most likely due to some kind of violent impact. But the problem was that from the foot of the mountain, they had been keeping a close eye on what was going on up there, but there hadn't been any movement at all up there, so the question was, where had the injury on Zhu Hanyun's arm come from? At that moment, Zhu Hanyun's face was red with shame, and he naturally didn't want to say more about what had just happened. Even if he did, he didn't intend to tell the truth. He had picked up an oar to sneak up on someone else, and had even smashed the back of the head, which was a fatal and fragile part. In the end, not only had the other party not been injured, he had even suffered a fracture. What an extraordinary shame and humiliation. The other party is very dangerous. Helpless, Zhu Hanyun could only exaggerate to highlight number 60 High's strength. I wanted to launch a sneak attack, but the other party saw through it. The other party was already prepared, and used a very strange defensive spell to cause my strength to rebound, and then I became like this. The other party was prepared. Hearing this, Nan Etian frowned deeply. It seemed that number 60 High's team also had a perception-type player. Not only had he predicted the night attack in advance, but he had also made preparations in advance. If it really was as Zhu Hanyun said, that the other party could predict and set up a defensive spell in advance to counteract Zhu Hanyun's attack. Nan Ishio could only think of the reverse armor spell. But given Zhu Hanyun's physique, even if he had been hit by the reverse armor spell, he might not have suffered a fracture. Unless he had cultivated this reverse armor spell to an extremely high level, which was at least level 7 or level 8, they were all Foundation establishment students. Nan Ishio found it inconceivable that someone could cultivate the reverse armor art, an unorthodox magic spell that wasn't part of his main curriculum, to such a high level. He never thought that the plan to encircle and annihilate number 60 High would actually fail in the first round, but Fire Peak was a very important stronghold, and the 4 great high schools had to work together to take down this bone. Don't send anyone up there for the time being. It's best if we use some tricks to force them down the mountain. Set a fire. Someone suggested. Set a mountain on fire and you'll die in prison. Of course we can't set a mountain fire so casually, but 9 Dragon Mountain's terrain is special. The rainbow mist in the morning can repair the vegetation and extinguish the fire, so it shouldn't be a big problem. But the main reason we're fighting for Fire Peak with number 60 High is for resources. It takes time for the rainbow mist to repair the vegetation. If we set a fire to seize the territory, it'll be meaningless if we burn all the spirit plants here. We have to think of another way, said Nan Ishio. Elsewhere, at number 60 High's camp on the mountaintop, Gu Xuanji had long since noticed what was going on at the foot of the mountain. Despite the thick fog, this level of fog was useless against him. 40 people are underground. Gu Xuanji used a branch to draw a map of the situation at the foot of the mountain. Students from 4 cultivation high schools were restlessly watching number 60 High's camp from underground. Are we surrounded? Super Chen and Hero Guo frowned. For the time being, they hadn't found a way out. A few minutes later, countless hellfire actually appeared below them. The other party used the spirit summoning spell. Super Chen immediately identified the origin of this spell. Because this was the first thing they had learned in Teacher Pan's Dao Talismans class in the first semester. It was also in that Dao Talismans class that he had used this spell. He summoned Loopy Toad's remnant soul. Chapter 1155. As the saying went, the Great Tao was the simplest. As a compulsory course in the first semester of Foundation Establishment Cultivation High Schools, the Spirit Summoning Spell was self-evident in its importance. Wang Ling had accidentally summoned Loopy Toad back then, and now that he saw the Spirit Summoning Spell again, he suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Now that they were being besieged by 4 high schools, and Zhu Hanyun, as the vanguard, had failed, Nan Yishou had immediately thought of using the Spirit Summoning Spell as a joint encirclement and suppression method. There were over 40 people in total from the 4 high schools, and if they used the Spirit Summoning Spell together, they could summon no fewer than several hundred spirits. Even if they couldn't hurt number 60 High with these spirits as the vanguard, it was more than enough to break through the enemy's formation. Furthermore, as a basic spell, the Spirit Summoning Spell didn't consume much energy to begin with. After repeated summoning, the number of spirits became very large. When these colorful spiritual bodies surrounded them from the foot of the mountain, it still gave people a shocking déjà vu feeling like they were in a sci-fi blockbuster. Jiulong Mountain, as a modern national natural spirit plant and spirit beast reserve, the spirits that could be summoned here were naturally not weak. The weakest spirit that could be summoned here was at least a level 6 spirit beast. Although Zhu Hanyun had lost an arm, it did not affect him from summoning a spirit with his other arm. He summoned a level 4 3-headed fire lion. For a Foundation Establishment cultivator, being able to summon a 4th-class spirit was already very astonishing. It could only be said that Zhu Hanyun was worthy of being the team leader of Titan High School. Although his vanguard operation had failed, it still couldn't hide his excellence. As expected of Captain Zhu. As the vanguard of the army of spirits, this 4th-class 3-headed fire lion will definitely scatter number 60 High's formation. Seeing the results of everyone's spirit summoning, Nan Yishou felt that the situation was basically stable. Although the spirits that were summoned definitely wouldn't be as strong as the real bodies, and would only have 20% of their fighting strength, they should be more than enough to deal with number 60 High on the mountain. The 4 high schools were now in an alliance, and it was understandable for them to boast about each other's businesses. But for some reason, Zhu Hanyun, who had already experienced the strangeness of number 60 High School, wasn't happy at all when he heard Nan Yishou's boast. He felt that no. 60 High was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons this time, and that the whole school might have been underestimated. Before participating in the competition, Zhu Hanyun vaguely recalled what their headmaster, Lu Tian, had told them to never look down on other schools, especially number 60 High. Now that Zhu Hanyun recalled the principal's instructions, he suddenly felt the depth of it. The 4 high schools were now working together to besiege number 60 High, and they had the advantage in numbers, which indeed seemed to be advantageous. But number 60 High had already established a foothold on the mountain and had successfully set up camp. If they were to adopt a defensive strategy and then make a surprise move, the outcome would be very unpredictable. Although they had the advantage in numbers, having more people was also a disadvantage. In a situation where they didn't have the geographical advantage, they couldn't effectively integrate their resources. Once they fell into a protracted battle, it would be disadvantageous to them. On the other side, at the top of the mountain, number 60 High's team swiftly came up with a strategy in the face of the spirit bodies that were gradually closing in on them. In a situation where they already occupied the geographical advantage, they would naturally choose to defend. Furthermore, because of Ohai, number 60 High wasn't worried about the people at the foot of the mountain cutting off their water supply. Ohai was very powerful. As long as they needed to, he could use the south-north water diversion to open up a path and lead the nearby river to their feet. The truth was that the moment these spirit bodies appeared, Gu Xuanji had already thought of 16,020 ways to eliminate them all in an instant. But the problem was that he would expose his true strength. After all, their purpose in coming to number 60 High was to learn how to keep a low profile from Wang Ling. They're using the spirit summoning spell, so we should do the same, Super Chen suggested at that moment. Everyone knew how to summon spirits. In this case, it was nothing more than a matter of luck. Given that their spirit energy levels were about the same, Zhu Hanyun had been able to summon a 4th-class 3-headed fire lion, and Super Chen felt that he could summon one of similar quality. Gu Xuanji, using the spirit summoning spell as well, actually, it wasn't impossible. But the problem was that Gu Xuanji, Wang Zhen, and the others were well aware that if they used this strategy, it would also be risky. They could control their strength, and it wouldn't be a problem at all for them to accurately summon a spirit. But who knew what terrible thing their Ling Jinren would summon? Then it's settled. I'll go first. As the team leader, Lotus Sun bravely raised her hand. She swiftly made a hand seal, gathered spirit energy in her palm, and then slapped it hard on the ground. As the spirit summoning array swiftly lit up on the ground, a huge pure white flower came into view. What's this? It looks like the snow hibiscus of 9 Dragon Mountains Ice Peak. A 4th-class spirit plant has a certain level of spiritual intelligence. As expected of Captain Lotus Sun. Super Chen and the others exclaimed in admiration. Then, everyone began to summon spirits one after another. The spirit body that Master of Dopey summoned this time was a huge sky-capturing spirit elephant. Although it was big, it was too cumbersome and wasn't very agile. Furthermore, it was a 6th-class spirit elephant, and its overall fighting strength wasn't that great. AI, that's too much. Hero Gua sighed. The thing he had summoned in class last time hadn't been outstanding, so he had secretly practiced the spirit summoning spell for a long time after he went back. In the end, he had dropped the ball again in the official competition. Sometimes, a competition depends on luck. You might not be a competition player. When it was Xia Ming's turn, he sneered softly and was full of confidence in his spirit summoning spell. He had obtained a special power from that mysterious white-haired youngster, so the thing he could summon would naturally be unparalleled. This time, he had to put on a good show in front of Lotus Sun. Thinking this, Xia Ming started to make hand seals. The whole process was as smooth as flowing water. Then, what everyone didn't expect was, when Xia Ming's palm slapped the ground to activate the spirit summoning array, a huge array appeared in front of everyone's eyes. What was going on? The people at the foot of the mountain were dumbfounded. This spirit summoning array was so huge that it could be said to be rare. It actually burst through the entire body of Fire Peak, and was wrapped around the mountainside like a hula hoop. Xia Ming himself was taken aback by the scale of the array. He had just wanted to show off in front of the girl he liked, but the situation in front of him seemed to have exceeded his expectations. Boom! With a resounding boom, a giant lava hand the size of a mountain gushed out of the huge spirit summoning array. Chapter 1156. Fire Peak's mountain spirit. No one knew exactly what had happened, and Xia Ming, the culprit, was dumbfounded. The mountain spirit of Fire Peak was a super first-class nature creature, and was much more powerful than spirit beasts. Xia Ming never thought that he would actually be able to directly summon the mountain spirit with the most basic, spirit summoning spell. At that moment, everyone at the foot of the mountain was completely stupefied as they stared at the giant hand of molten salt stretching out of the mountain peak. What the hell, what's that? Is it a mountain spirit? How can a Foundation establishment student summon a mountain spirit? Even if Grandpa Lou reincarnated, this cheat is outrageous. Retreat. Retreat. Everyone, keep your distance. Nan Ishio was a perception-type student, and had been observing the activity on the mountain the whole time. The moment the mountain spirit appeared, his head buzzed and exploded on the spot. He split open. At the same time, many screens in the command center flashed, and all the headmasters stood up in shock as they stared at the images on the screens. This is a mountain spirit. Can the spirit summoning spell summon a mountain spirit? In theory, yes, but it's only a small probability. Is it a freak accident that a Foundation establishment cultivator can summon a mountain spirit? Let's not worry about that for now. Saving people is more important. What about these students? A headmaster cried out in alarm. This could be said to be a wake-up call. The mountain spirit had appeared, and its palm was like the wrath of nature. Foundation establishment cultivators were far from being able to resist it. Although this kind of natural creature would awaken every year, it usually wouldn't show up in its true form. Earthquakes, tsunamis, mudslides. In fact, most of these natural disasters were signs that the mountain spirit had awakened. When human activities disturbed the tranquility of nature, the mountain spirit would awaken. It went without saying how powerful they were. Sometimes just turning over or yawning could cause great damage. This kind of power was also known as the power of nature. At the same time, however, mountain spirits were shy creatures, and their true forms were rarely exposed to human cultivators. Some mountain spirits could sleep for hundreds or even thousands of years at a time. They were more used to sleeping in the dark. Thus, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the mountain spirit of Fire Peak had awakened and even stretched out its hand at that moment. Send some men there immediately. Old Huang was instantly alerted. The mountain spirit's untimely appearance made him think of an extremely low probability scenario. Teacher, do you suspect that there's an evil force behind this? President Qi instantly understood. A natural spirit like the mountain spirit could only be disturbed by human malice. It would be very difficult for a Foundation establishment student's spirit summoning spell to rouse the mountain spirit, unless an even more evil existence happened to be nearby. Thus, the instant that classmate Xia Ming summoned the spirit, evil power poured in through the channel opened by the spirit's summoning spell, and the mountain spirit was instantly awakened. If one were to describe this feeling, it would be like a person who was sleeping soundly being slapped in the face. Very quickly, Wang Ling saw the people in red from the station's special forces quickly approaching them. Each of them held a copy of the Code of Nature, and it was clear that they had prepared for a similar crisis. Although the probability of the mountain spirit waking up was very small, they couldn't rule it out. The Code of Nature was a pure music Bible compiled by powerful cultivators. As long as it was combined with a certain sound wave spell, it would have the effect of soothing the spirits of nature. But the situation at the scene was actually far worse than they had imagined. Xia Ming had been possessed by an evil force, and his strength had increased abnormally. Summoning the souls of first or second-class spirit beasts was actually quite basic, but summoning the mountain spirit was a big problem. The human devil who had been following them and observing them in secret was the catalyst that had awakened the mountain spirit. I can't wait any longer. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He liked peace and quiet. What he hated the most was being disturbed. He didn't want to participate in the national competition this time. What he didn't want even more was to be disturbed. Given the current situation, if he didn't find the root cause, it would be very difficult to coax the mountain spirit to sleep just by chanting the Code of Nature. His gaze was fixed on the shadow that had been following him for a long time in the dark. Human devil Xiao Lixing was the culprit behind all this. At the same time, Xiao Lixing was overjoyed when he saw the mountain spirit's true form. His holy devil-suppressing strength could devour anything. If he could devour the mountain spirit, he would be 3 times stronger than he had been at his peak. But just as Xiao Lixing was about to make a move, he felt as if he was being watched by a pair of eyes. A pair of huge eyes, like the sun, stared at his back, causing Xiao Lixing to instantly doubt his life. He felt as if he was being stared at by a great power. In comparison, he was like a small meteorite that was being stared at, and could be sucked in at any time. What was going on? Who on earth was it? These were the two biggest questions in Xiao Lixing's mind. Then, in the darkness, Xiao Lixing heard footsteps. It was a Foundation establishment youngster from number 60 high who was walking toward him. Xiao Lixing. Could it be him? Xiao Lixing felt his three views start to crumble. Previously, he had been wondering if his existence had been discovered, and now, Wang Ling's actions told Xiao Lixing the answer. As Wang Ling's footsteps gradually closed in, that seemingly thin figure gradually approached. Xiao Lixing's emotions were in turmoil. At first, he was surprised, then astonished, and finally, he was deeply frightened. Wang Ling stretched out his hand and used the Great Purification spell to suppress him. The spirits of all living things that Xiao Lixing had recently devoured instantly gushed out of his black hole-like body. It was only for a moment. The withered spirit plants and dead spirit beasts in the sealed area that General Bai had led the Mahjong trio to earlier had miraculously come back to life. Xiao Lixing's whole body was weak from vomiting. The power of Wang Ling's Great Purification spell was far beyond Xiao Lixing's imagination. It actually had the powerful effect of turning something rotten into something magical. Who on earth are you? Xiao Lixing had a frightened expression on his face. Wang Ling faced him. He didn't want to say a single word. This guy was too weak. He was weaker than any of the Mahjong trio that Wang Ling had seen before. He had devoured too many souls, but hadn't had time to digest them all, so his strength hadn't grown substantially. Thus, the Great Purification spell had directly reduced him to his original state. Furthermore, using the King's Eye to connect to the power of Fate Dao, Wang Ling could see that the human devil in front of him was in fact already dead. Since he was already dead, in that case, he should just sleep forever, and so, without any nonsense. Wang Ling stretched out his hand and touched Xiao Lixing's forehead with the Great Salvation spell. Chapter 1157. The resurrection of a dead person. The same pattern made Wang Ling realize that his previous guess had been spot on. Whether it was Bai Yuquan, President Bai's son, or Nightmare, whom President Qi had captured in the Nine Dragon Pagoda, it was the same person who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. The profound meaning of Fate Dao was to control life and death and defy the heavens to change fate. It wasn't a simple resurrection spell. Although Xiao Lixing had been resurrected, under the control of the power of Fate Dao, the Xiao Lixing of many parallel worlds would become his substitute at a critical moment and die in his place. Thus, a normal heavenly Dao spell wouldn't work at all. But the Great Transcendence spell was different. This was one of the top 10 spells of Wang Ling's 30,000 heavenly Dao, and could transcend all things in the universe. Any evil spirit would dissipate into nothingness under the effect of the Great Transcendence spell. That was to say, after Xiao Lixing was hit by the Great Transcendence spell, even if he was constantly resurrected on the spot because of Fate Dao, as long as Wang Ling didn't remove the Great Transcendence spell, the power of transcendence would always exist, and so, what Xiao Lixing was now performing in front of Wang Ling was a rare death sit-up. Wang Ling didn't know how many Fate Dao the person behind the scenes had allocated to Xiao Lixing. If he had only been allocated 100 times like Bai Yuquan, then Xiao Lixing would have died 100 times. If it had been 3,000 times, he would have died 3,000 times. But compared with human devil Xiao Lixing, Bai Yuquan was a little more stupid. He had combined the power of 100 Fate Dao into one, thinking that he could defeat Wang Ling in this way. Wang Ling felt that when all was said and done, Bai Yuquan was still too young. But according to Audiobook, Bai Yuquan was still very tight-lipped. He was now in Leifeng Pagoda suffering the same torture as immortal Shi Pai back then, and would be punished by lightning every day until he told the truth. And so, 1 minute later, after Xiao Lixing died nearly 600 times under Wang Ling's great transcendent spell at the speed of a thunderbolt, he was dead for good. If this rate of dying once every 0.1 seconds was recorded, it would definitely be a new world record in cultivation history. But unfortunately, no one had seen this scene. Wang Ling had cast the spell from a relatively hidden place, and no one had seen it at all. After dealing with Xiao Lixing, Wang Ling walked out of the underbrush as if nothing had happened. With the death of the first-generation demon, the restless mountain spirits regained their tranquility. The giant hand that was dripping with blazing lava retracted from the summoning circle, and the mountain spirit of Fire Peak once again fell into a deep slumber. As Wang Ling had predicted, Xiao Lixing was the source of the uproar. Fortunately, he had acted in time. Otherwise, all the living beings on Fire Peak might have suffered because of the awakening of the mountain spirit. After all, apart from Wang Ling, almost no one could resist the power of nature. Wang Ling had never thought that he would be forced to take a lesson on protecting nature in this 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition. But in reality, things weren't over yet. First, the mastermind behind the scenes had yet to be found. Second, the Eye of Rebellion curse on Xiaoming had yet to be lifted. Xiaoming still had lingering fears that he had inadvertently summoned the mountain spirit and almost caused massive destruction. He hadn't yet recovered from his panic, and after the mountain spirit had calmed down, his expression was still blank, and he hadn't come back to his senses at all. The warning was lifted, and the magic ball in the command center, which was responsible for monitoring abnormal energy, calmed down again. Based on the monitoring data on the dashboard, the moment the mountain spirit had woken up, the fluctuations of spirit power on the dashboard had instantly reached a peak, and then dropped in the blink of an eye, like a roller coaster. Strange. Huang Feng frowned. The mountain spirit woke up, yawned, and then went back to sleep. It's very strange. I also think it's suspicious. President Qi also frowned. In their view, the mountain spirit wouldn't wake up for no reason at all, it had to have been alarmed by something. As for the fact that the spirit's summoning spell could summon the mountain spirit at the Foundation establishment stage, that could in fact be explained as a coincidence. For example, the mountain spirit had already shown signs of waking up, and with the spirit's summoning spell, it just so happened to have the effect of a sobering agent. However, the suspicious point wasn't completely clear. They still had to find out why the mountain spirit had been alarmed. The laws of nature are the lifeline of human life and death. No matter how high our cultivation levels are or how long we can live, the only planet suitable for us is Earth. It doesn't matter how high our cultivation levels are or how long we can live. We've made a breakthrough in our exploration of other planets recently, and discovered Divine Tao Star. But Divine Tao Star is too far away from us, and there are many other alien life forms living on it. In the end, cultural differences are troublesome, and it's unrealistic for us cultivators to immigrate there at the moment. Old Huang said unhurriedly, so, the most important thing is to protect what's in front of us. Many of the headmasters present nodded at these words. It was indeed important to look to the future, but the key was still to focus on the present. In the current cultivation world, humans weren't united enough, and there were still many loopholes that hadn't been addressed. The recent case of the doctor's murder was a living example. Cultivators who had devoted themselves to the medical cause with a heart full of passion had died under the blades of villains for no reason because of some hysterical patients. Thus, the world still needed to be made up for and changed. But it was precisely because of this need for change that cultivators could progress little by little and slowly make the world more complete and united. Old Qi. At that moment, President Qi heard General Bai's voice in the distance. President Qi, the command center has received your message, please speak. General Bai, that Xiao Lixing seems to be more cunning than I thought. We've already lost the target. Can we relocate him? Relocate him? President Chi nodded. He spread out his mental energy and didn't miss a single inch of Nine Dragon Mountain. When Xiao Lixing was alive back then, he had been one of the members of the operation team that had been hunting him down, so he felt a natural sense of familiarity with this human devil. A person couldn't disappear for no reason. Xiao Lixing was very crafty, so President Qi was sure that he had to have used some method to hide his tracks. But after a round of searching, President Qi found the result inconceivable. His eyes darkened. He disappeared from the map. How is that possible? Xiao Lixing is dead, Old Huang said as he opened his eyes. Teacher said that Xiao Lixing is dead. This. President Qi was shocked. If neither you nor I can sense Xiao Lixing's aura, then there's only one conclusion. A person can't disappear for no reason. Besides, Xiao Lixing's demonic nature is too strong, it's impossible that there aren't any clues at all. But how did he die? You have to give a reason, Old Huang nodded. It was hard to hide the solemnity on his face. At that moment, President Qi looked at Odd Zhuo on the side and confirmed that he hadn't left just now. Because based on past experience, Odd Zhuo was most likely responsible for this kind of bizarre incident. Chapter 1158. Now, let us welcome the host of this New Year's Dis Conference, Student Wang Ling, with a round of applause. In human form, Dog 2 stared at his flowing green hair as he calmly hosted the event. Dog 2 wasn't the host of this New Year's Dis Conference, but unfortunately, the program's budget was limited. Just activating the time array to bring the three protagonists together in the same space had already cost 99% of the budget. Hence, this New Year's Dis Conference was held in Kushuan's pigeon nest. Thunderous applause rang out in the audience, and grenade-throwing senior immortal, Little Silver and Fong Xing's eyes were brimming with tears. Because in this Dis Conference, Wang Ling, this man who didn't have more than 10 lines in a year, was finally going to speak. Thank you, everyone, for your enthusiastic applause. But please calm down, because the first person to appear is classmate Qin Zong, known as the only koi fish in the cultivation world. I heard that classmate Qin Zong wasn't qualified to be a guest today, and only became one through a lucky draw. Let us welcome classmate Qin to the stage with a fierce round of applause. On the sofa, Qin Zong's face was indescribably excited when Loopy Toad called his name. He quickly walked onto the stage and faced the audience, as well as Wang Ling, who was secretly eating crispy noodle snacks. Qin Zong, as you can see, including me, we actually have 5 guests today. That is, me, classmate Xiang Yi, classmate Lin Wan, classmate Sun and classmate Crispy Noodles. But as you can see, classmate Crispy Noodles has already been eaten by the host, Wang Ling. So from this, you can see what kind of ferocious program this is, that even the guests are eaten. Wang Ling, Qin Zong, classmate Xiang Yi is the protagonist of the 3rd book in which Pigeon Kushuan's brain suddenly spun. He is the man who inherited a wasteland cultivation world. He made his fortune by shuttling back and forth between the 2 worlds, picking up trash and building things. I have to say, this is also the most difficult of the 3 of us. He can be called the model worker among the protagonists. As long as I win the lottery while lying down, I can be the protagonist. As long as classmate Wang Ling lies down and acts cute, he can be the protagonist. Classmate Xiang Yi has died who knows how many times since the book began. Kushuan Pigeon has allowed him to experience all kinds of novel ways to die. I seriously suspect that in Kushuan Pigeon's real world, there's a brother called Xiang Yi who once offended old thief Kushuan, who was then written into the book. Xiang Yi nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Really? Actually, I've always had this feeling. Qin Zong, after student Xiang Yi, let's focus on student Lin Wan. As you can see, student Lin Wan is the only female lead in our 3 books. Ku Xian Pigeon obviously doesn't even have a girlfriend, but he gave Xiang Yi a girlfriend. He even specially set Lin Wan to have a toxic constitution. This is obviously revenge against Xiang Yi. Next, student Lotus Sun. Qin Zong looked over and saw Lotus Sun, who was sitting in the guest seat, straightening her back and greeting everyone with a smile on her face. Qin Zong cleared his throat. I'm very sorry, because student Lotus Sun doesn't have many scenes, I can't find anything to complain about. As a woman who was once forgotten by Ku Xian Pigeon, student Lotus Sun did her best to stand out in the later parts of the story, but unfortunately, it was all to no avail. Perhaps it was for this reason that student Lotus Sun became the female lead in the Immortal King cartoon. Perhaps this was Ku Xian Pigeon's compensation? Lotus Sun, speaking up to this point, Qin Zong heaved a deep sigh, then looked at Wang Ling in the host seat. Finally, let's focus on the man who ate the guest at the very beginning. Wang Ling, Qin Zong, a lot of people say that I became a protagonist because I bribed student Wang Ling. But the truth is that as the only koi in the cultivation world, I refused to be a koi in the beginning. Everyone knows that I threw away the express delivery package from the immortal continent. But fate has chosen me. In the new year, I hope that everyone will be as lucky as me, and that you will pass every test and turn misfortune into fortune. I heard that as long as you leave a message in this paragraph and make a wish, Ling Zhenren will definitely bless you. Thank you. I am Qin Zong. Dog 2, student Qin's speech is very touching. But as the protagonist of Ku Xian's third new book, let's hear what student Xiang Yi has to say. Xiang Yi, hello everyone, I'm that man who has died so many times that even my ashes have been scattered, but I'm still alive and kicking. A lot of people think that Pigeon Ku Xian has a grudge against me, but I actually think that he wrote me into this third book as a way to divert attention. He's trying to avoid the fact that he has fallen in love with cross-dressing. He's trying to drown himself in the ocean of writing, so that he can forget his penchant for cross-dressing. But the voice of the masses can't be forgotten. I hope that everyone can speak up in this paragraph and let old thief Ku Xian hear the voice of the masses. Sorry, I might have been a little too excited. It's mainly because I've finally met my idol, student Wang Ling. Before I came, I once asked Pigeon Ku Xian why all three of us are protagonists, and why student Wang Ling can be the main character. Later, I realized that the three of us mean different things to Ku Xian. As everyone knows, Pigeon Ku Xian has the habit of writing theme songs for the protagonists of his books. Student Qin Zong and I each have a custom-made theme song. One is called True, and the other is called Countercurrent Koi, and Countercurrent Koi even has a music video. Student Wang Ling has 3 songs. Theme song, interlude, and China-style interlude. Old thief Ku Xian said that Wang Ling is his biological son. Qin Zong is his adopted son. I was picked up from the trash can, dog 2, I'm very sorry. Student Xiang Yi couldn't control his emotions at this point and suddenly suffered a heart attack. Please take student Xiang Yi down to rest. Student Lin Wan is taking care of him, so I'm afraid he'll be absent from the dissing conference recording. Lotus Sun, should I call an ambulance? Dog 2, no need, student Xiang Yi has a resurrection token. If he dies from a heart attack, he can come back to life immediately. Everyone, dog 2, next, let's give a warm round of applause to this episode's main star, student Wang Ling. Lotus Sun. Hello, everyone. I'm Wang Ling. As soon as he said that, there was a thunderous round of applause. Wang Ling rubbed his ears. He didn't know why, but his words had stirred up the atmosphere. Grenade-throwing senior immortal, go, brother Ling. Little Silver, go, master. Mother Wang, go, Ling Ling. Mommy loves you. 3. Wang Ling, Old thief said, if I praise him today, I won't have to worry about crispy noodle snacks next year, but I'm not a man who speaks against his conscience, I have to admit. Old thief, he's indeed very handsome, even in women's clothes, he's very beautiful, sorry. I really can't make it up anymore, dog too, I can see that our student Wang Ling is indeed a little nervous. Then, let me finish reading master's script on behalf of my master. Old thief Kuxuan, don't think that I won't ridicule you just because I'm the protagonist of the cartoon. The Immortal King isn't updating, but you insist on opening the other 2 books. Don't you know that it's easy to die suddenly when you write a book in the 3rd volume? You don't have Xiang Yi's resurrection token. And because you stay at home every day in the 3rd volume, you've become a month and a half again. You can't even fit into the women's clothes you bought last year. The Immortal King cartoon was supposed to be released in June 2018, but it's been ditched day after day. Don't think that I won't hit you just because you drew me so handsome. What surprises me the most is that there's actually a female protagonist in the cartoon. She's called Lotus Sun, so, who is Lotus Sun? Lotus Sun. Kuxuan's words, it's almost the new year, and there are actually a lot of things I haven't said yet, but I still want to leave some things to explain to everyone after the Immortal King cartoon is successfully released. Thank you very much for your concern, brothers and sisters. The 2019 Immortal King cartoon has experienced many twists and turns, and we finally welcome new news at the end of the year. There is no doubt that this is a good start. In 2020, Pai Pai Ku sincerely wishes everyone a happy new year and all the best. Chapter 1159. As Wang Ling's little cotton-padded jacket, Audua was naturally well aware of how important this scapegoat task was. However, he felt that it would be very difficult to pin the blame on him this time. First of all, his movements were restricted to the command center, and secondly, even if he fought Human Devil, the difference in their battle strength was completely unequal. Human Devil was too strong, there was no way Audua could deal with it on his own. But Audua, who was well versed in the law of being a scapegoat, was well aware that even if he hadn't done it, the blame could still fall on him in the end. It was fine as long as he didn't admit that he hadn't done it. Under Old Huang and President Chi's gazes, Audua did his best to maintain a calm expression. A few minutes later, there was news from the Mahjong team. When the screen switched to the scene, Audua suddenly saw a figure with green hair. This is... Headmaster Chen felt that the image on the screen was a little familiar, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. That was right, this was the first time that Loopy Toad's human form had appeared in public. No one would have thought that the green-furred Akita from a few months ago would actually cultivate into a human form in a short period of time. Audua remembered that Loopy Toad and Little Silver were supposed to act together, but Loopy Toad was the only one here, which was probably to protect Little Silver's holy beast identity. Who is this? There was a vigilant look in Old Huang's eyes. On the other side, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal immediately got in touch with President Chi. It's Mr. Chong a member of the Office of Strategic Deception's Goon Team. Mr. Chong Old Huang was lost in thought. He didn't remember this name on the list he had seen 2 days ago. President Chi secretly explained to Huang Feng telepathically, it's like this, Old Huang. In fact, there is a hidden list among the entourage this time, which was personally appointed by the head of state. Even we don't know about this list, only the head of state knows about it. The goal is to prevent the real list from being stolen, and the head of state is on guard against the members on our list. And the purpose of this invisible list is to catch them off guard. Huang Feng nodded and instantly understood. As expected of the head of state, to actually be so far-sighted. In fact, he had wanted to pursue the matter. But since it was a hidden member personally appointed by the head of state, there was nothing he could do. But what is the background of this Mr. Chong He's one of the Office of Strategic Deception's experts, and has the strength of an itinerant immortal. Furthermore, The opponent's cultivation technique has a powerful restraining effect on evil spirits, so he was able to eliminate the human devil when he was caught off guard. I see. At this point, Old Huang felt that he finally understood the whole story, and he thanked Loopy Toad on the screen. Thank you, Mr. Chong-er, for helping out this time. If it weren't for you, sir, and the demon continued to wreak havoc, I'm afraid that the entire 9-Dragon Mountain would have suffered irreversible damage. Worm 2 combination was Loopy Toad's alias in its human form. It was in fact a side radical that had been dismantled and reassembled. Loopy Toad was well aware that very few people knew about its human form. Having an alias also helped to hide one's identity. Furthermore, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had already helped him get his ID card ready. Now he was a dog with a proper identity. Furthermore, his household registration was in Songhai City. These days, many people ran around for the sake of a household registration. Now, even a dog like him could have a household registration. Originally, he could only use the identity of a dog to silently contribute to the human race. This could be considered Loopy Toad's first time coming out from behind the scenes. It couldn't help feeling a little excited. Old Huang, you flatter me. The truth is that I'm not the only one to take credit for this. When Loopy Toad said this, the atmosphere in the command center instantly froze. Audiobook raised his head in astonishment. As a scapegoat who fought on the front line all year round, he suddenly sensed the subtlety in Loopy Toad's words. It was Director Joie. He was the one who arranged everything, Loopy Toad said at that moment. He gave an answer that everyone did not expect, but it was within reason. The expressions on the faces of everyone in the command center flickered, and countless headmasters turned their gazes to two people. One was number 60 High School's headmaster Chin. The other was naturally Joie. Director Joie, how many people in the world could represent this familiar title? Headmaster Chin, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face at this point. Joie's future was limitless, which was also a boost to number 60 High School's morale. When number 60 High School was renovated and rebuilt, the original old stone statue at the school gate would be remodeled into a life-size portrait of Joie. It was also a great blessing for number 60 High School to have produced such a student. As the current headmaster of number 60 High School, it was impossible for Headmaster Chin not to publicize it. Under everyone's gazes, Headmaster Chin could only shrug his shoulders with an indifferent attitude. Everyone, thank you for letting me win. Our number 60 High School students have always been outstanding. When he said this, the group of headmasters immediately felt sour in their hearts. It sounded very shameless, but they couldn't find any reason to refute it. As the person in question, Audiobook clearly had a vexed expression on his face. He knew that things would turn out like this in the end. On the other side, as Fire Peak's mountain spirit fell silent once more, the siege around Fire Peak resumed. It was just that this time, no one dared to use the spirit summoning spell in battle. The high schools at the bottom decided to fight to the death, and gathered all the strength of the 4 high schools to launch a general attack on the top of the mountain. No matter how many people they lost, they would swallow number 60 High School first. The general attack is starting from below. According to the strategy they had decided on at the beginning, number 60 High School would still focus on defense. Even in the face of the attack from the 4 high schools, everyone was still full of confidence. However, one person clearly felt that something wasn't right. That person was Xiaoming. Xiaoming felt that he already clearly understood what it felt like to possess great power. It was certainly a good thing to have power, but if he couldn't control this power and it would eventually hurt the person he liked. Xiaoming felt that he might as well not have this power. When he saw Fire Peak's mountain spirit's giant hand stretch out from the ground, Xiaoming was stupefied. He didn't want to believe that he had single-handedly created this scene. Although the mountain spirit had already fallen asleep again, Xiaoming no longer had the courage to use his power. He was afraid that he would lose control of it again, Amid his nervousness, Xiaoming felt a warm hand suddenly press down on his shoulder. Who was it? He turned his head slightly, and was surprised to find that it was Wang Ling standing behind him. Chapter 1160. When one's strength was so strong that they couldn't control it, that kind of fear and trembling involuntarily emerged. Wang Ling had experienced this feeling countless times as a child. Every dark night, he would wake up with a start, afraid that he would do something bad after falling asleep. After all, for Wang Ling, before the Dao Talisman seal had been officially researched, destroying the world with a wave of his hand was nothing difficult. Even with the Dao Talisman seal now, it didn't mean that Wang Ling was truly free. His strength continued to grow, and one day it would exceed the Dao Talisman seal's capacity. Wang Ling didn't say anything, but the moment his hand gently touched Xiaoming's shoulder, their thoughts connected for a split second. In a few short seconds, Xiaoming felt as if he could see Wang Ling's life. The loneliness of being invincible caused his tears to gush out uncontrollably. Wang Ling had chosen to act at this moment because he knew that this was the perfect opportunity to get rid of the Eye of Rebellion in Xiaoming's body. But Wang Ling had missed one point. This Eye of Rebellion was also a type of Fate Dao spell. When Wang Ling had tried to get rid of it, his and Xiaoming's fate lines had intersected for a brief moment. And it was also during this brief interaction that Xiaoming knew what kind of existence Wang Ling was on Earth. The people in school didn't know much about him. Although their fate lines had intersected and seemed to have exposed him, Wang Ling wasn't worried that Xiaoming would say anything. Because it was all like a dream, once the fate lines separated, they would quickly disappear and be forgotten. You won't feel pain anymore. Wang Ling left a comforting message in Xiaoming's heart. As soon as Wang Ling said this, the Eye of Rebellion, curse in Xiaoming's abdomen was uprooted like a festering sore on the soles of his feet, and then disappeared without a trace. When he came back to his senses, Xiaoming realized that he was crying, but he didn't know what on earth he had just seen. Memories of the Eye of Rebellion, what that white-haired youngster had threatened him to do, and the other side of Wang Ling that no one knew about, he had completely forgotten all of it. But Xiaoming felt that he had become normal. He no longer trembled or was afraid because of his strength. He didn't even know why, but he didn't hate Wang Ling at all. Classmate Wang Ling, you. Xiaoming had thought that Wang Ling would hate him, but now that he was flinching and afraid, it was Wang Ling who had appeared behind him at the first instant to support his back with one hand and give him warm strength. No wonder classmate Lotus Sun likes you so much. At that moment, Xiaoming looked at Wang Ling and couldn't help sighing. Classmate Wang Ling, I've decided to give up my fight with you. Student Lotus Sun indeed deserves someone better. Xiaoming stared at Wang Ling with an unwavering gaze as he spoke righteously, making Wang Ling feel inexplicably alarmed. Why did he give it to me? Wang Ling was dumbstruck. If you don't fight for it, who am I going to use as a shield for that lass in the future? Wang Ling never thought that when he had just casually helped remove an evil curse, he would suddenly gain another fan. There was indeed a spell in his 30,000 great paths that could forcibly turn people into fans and chase after them like idols. This spell was the Great Fan spell, but because Wang Ling didn't use it often, it was a little difficult to control his strength. If he used too much strength when casting the spell, the fan would completely turn into an even more frightening, sayseeing fan, the kind who could find out where your home was and lurk inside a week in advance, waiting to secretly take photos of you bathing. Because his relationship with Xiaoming had been a little strained before, Wang Ling had thought about whether or not to use the Great Fan spell. But in view of the bug in this Great Dao, in the end he hadn't used it on Xiaoming. Wang Ling didn't want another male sayseeing fan squatting in his house every day taking photos of his life. But why had Xiaoming become a fan of him? Wang Ling felt that it might have something to do with Fate Dao. When two people's fates were connected, it would probably produce an effect similar to the Great Fan spell, which would reconcile those contradictions through the fetters of fate. This was the only plausible explanation that Wang Ling could think of at the moment. Go! At that moment, there was a shout from all around number 60 High's impregnable defensive barrier. Nan Yishio, the captain of South Sea Sky High School, and Zhu Hanyun, the captain of Titan High School, led the charge. Forming hand seals, they used all kinds of spells to bombard number 60 High's defensive barrier. But breaking through this barrier was easier said than done, since Gu Xuanji and the others had worked together to set it up. Moreover, these people were very cunning. In order to make their barrier look less strong, they used a kind of barrier that looked very thin. This kind of ultra-thin barrier was naturally less resilient, but in contrast, Gu Xuanji and the others adjusted the barrier's recovery ability. In other words, while this ultra-thin barrier looked very easy to break, it was in fact breaking and healing at the same time. No matter how these people concentrated their fire, it felt like they were just one breath away from breaking the barrier. Those who played with tactics had dirty hearts. Wang Ling sighed with emotion in his heart. He felt that Gu Xuanji and the others had learned the true meaning of lying low from him. Nan Yishio, Zhu Hanyun, and more than 40 other people concentrated their fire on number 60 High's barrier for more than 10 minutes, but in the end still hadn't broken through. Considering the problem of spirit energy consumption, they had no choice but to retreat for the time being and sit cross-legged to regulate their breathing. What's going on? Number 60 High's barrier can't be broken. It can be broken. I feel like we're just a little bit away every time. The students discussed their strategy. Number 60 High was indeed a tough nut to crack. At the very least, it was much more difficult than they had imagined. Survivors remaining, 519, looking at the number of survivors projected from the top of the mountain dome, Nan Yishio and the others instantly felt a strong sense of crisis. If this went on and they didn't have enough spirit energy to replenish themselves, they would be faced with two scenarios: either number 60 High would counterattack, or the other teams that had come here would swallow them up. This isn't good. Nan Yishio and Zhu Hanyun both felt a headache coming on. Furthermore, Zhu Hanyun's arm was injured, which urgently needed to be treated with good herbs. Although Nan Yishio knew some medical skills, they clearly weren't enough. What should we do? Everyone at the foot of the mountain instantly looked a little hopeless. But it was at that moment that they actually saw a paper plane fly down from the top of the mountain. The paper plane hit Nan Yishio squarely in the forehead. He opened it to see what was written on it: "If you give up on attacking, you can consider joining us and forming an alliance. On the last day, we'll fight a decisive battle on top of the mountain dome." "What does it say?" asked Zhu Hanyun. "It says we can join them and form an alliance together." "But there's a condition," said Nan Yishio. "What condition?" "Join classmate Wang Ling's fan club." Chapter 1161. In fact, this was exactly Xia Ming's idea, and it hit it off right away, gaining the support of the vast majority of the team. It wasn't that there weren't people who opposed it, such as Super Chin. On one hand, he felt that setting up a personal fan club was too conspicuous, and on the other hand, he vaguely felt that Wang Ling actually didn't like such conspicuous behavior. It had to be said that as the Emperor of Truth, Wang Ling felt that Super Chin was indeed a rare good brother. But the problem was that most of the people in this team were his fans. In a situation where the minority had to obey the majority, Super Chen's veto naturally had no effect. Wang Ling's fan club, what's that, and who is Wang Ling? Nan Yishio was a little dazed. He searched his memories and realized that he couldn't recall any details about Wang Ling. "It's that lucky dead fish," Zhu Hanyun said at that moment. He wouldn't forget Wang Ling's appearance, since it was thanks to Wang Ling that he had lost an arm. But after Zhu Hanyun's reminder, a lot of people started to remember. "Oh, it's him, I remember him, he's number 60 High's mascot." Several people crowded around and saw the rules for joining Wang Ling's fan club written on the paper plane. 1. Join this fan club and you'll get the God of Exams halo. Mom won't have to worry about your studies anymore. 2. You must love and protect the club's designated mascot, classmate Wang Ling. 3. You must protect the mascot's personal safety. 4. If you betray this fan club, you will be cursed with failing a subject and will have trouble in any competition or exam. 5. This fan club will charge you 2 yuan and 50 cents per month. If you don't pay, you will be punished in accordance with rule number 4. Everyone, have trouble in any competition or exam. Is it that strange? Some people question the authenticity of these rules. What should we do? Should we join? There's no other way. We can't ignore Brother Zhu's hand injury. Let's join first. Number 60 High's classmate Lotus Sun is the young master of Huaguo Water Curtain Group. She knows how to mix elixirs, and should be able to help Brother Zhu's arm recover quickly, said Nan Yishio. Although there were still some people in the crowd who weren't willing to join, it was fine as long as the captains of each school made the final decision. They had to listen to the captain's commands, and if something really went wrong, the captains would take the blame. It was only the first day of the survival battle. No one wanted to be eliminated so quickly. So, a few minutes later, the captains of the 4 schools came together and used magic to weave Morse code to send a signal of surrender. Then, a group of people began to go up the mountain. Most of the 40-odd people didn't believe in the regulations themselves. In particular, Nan Yishio felt that this was nothing more than a game. As long as they rested and reorganized themselves, they would immediately launch an encirclement to swallow number 60 High. Thus, at this moment, Nan Yishio actually didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. This rule was personally written by Gu Xuanji. As the manager of the Order of the Universe, he paid the most attention to rules and regulations. This seemed like a dispensable game, but the universe mentioned in the rules were all real. In other words, betraying the fan club would result in serious consequences. Wang Ling knew that the purpose behind this fan club was in fact one of Gu Xuanji's strategies. They were all almighties, so it would be too obvious if they made a move. However, he could cast some simple curses of bad luck. Using these curses to eliminate those who had rebellious hearts, he could do it without anyone knowing. Moreover, they didn't even have to take special precautions. On the first night, number 60 High successfully formed an alliance with 4 schools, led by South Sea Sky High and Titan High, to occupy the territory of Fire Peak. But it clearly wasn't a peaceful night. Lotus Sun helped Zhu Hanyun change the bandages that had been covered with plasters. She had made these plasters with the automatic pill-making machine. Medicinal herbs were first made into elixirs, and then the elixirs were mashed and mixed with water to make plasters. This is a special bone healing ointment. After applying it for 6 hours, your injury will be completely healed. Lotus Sun patiently helped Zhu Hanyun change the bandages, making the boys around them envious. As the future successor of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, Lotus Sun actually paid more attention to her image in front of outsiders. Since they had already decided to form an alliance, it was only right for them to help each other. Zhu Hanyun had thought that Lotus Sun was a lofty girl, but never expected her to be far gentler than he had imagined after this interaction. What should he do? Could he join the fan club instead? He wanted to join Lotus Sun's fan club. Brother, don't think too much about it. Our captain treats everyone the same. At that moment, Super Chin came over and patted Zhu Hanyun on the shoulder. When he saw that Zhu Hanyun's imagination was running wild after Lotus Sun changed Zhu Hanyun's bandages, he knew that this guy might have misunderstood something. As the school goddess, Lotus Sun was indeed very gentle to everyone, and there was practically no difference between them. If she had to find someone more enthusiastic, it would probably be Wang Ling. But Super Chin felt that he could understand what was going on between Lotus Sun and Wang Ling. After all, the two of them had experienced the assassination attempt in the Shao family compound back then, and when all was said and done, they could be said to have gone through life and death together. As the saying went, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Only the person involved would understand this feeling. Zhu Hanyun wasn't a fool. Seeing Super Chen's thoughtful expression, he felt that this was a man with a story. Are you also one of classmate Lotus Sun's suitors? I was, Super Chen said lightly. Super Chen said lightly, but later I realized that classmate Lotus Sun had too many pursuers, so I gave up. As a person, you should be more realistic. Besides, there are many times when liking someone is just a spur of the moment. After I calmed down and thought about it carefully, I realized that classmate Lotus Sun might not really be suitable for me. You're so realistic. The corners of Zhu Hanyun's mouth twitched. So, classmate Lotus Sun has someone she likes. Have you seen the video from a while ago? Super Chen asked. The video he was referring to was actually the one of Xia Ming and Wang Ling's duel, but later, this video was banned from the internet and couldn't be found anymore. Video? What video? It's nothing, it's fine if you didn't see it. Anyway, I think classmate Sun probably has someone she likes. At that moment, Super Chen turned to look at Wang Ling. He didn't say it directly, but the hint was clear enough. Is that so? Zhu Hanyun stood up with a slightly disappointed expression. Super Chen was startled. Aren't you going to duel him? No. Zhu Hanyun shook his head. I've already joined the fan club, how could I be rude to classmate Wang Ling? Since this is someone classmate Sun likes. He must be outstanding in some way. I've decided, I must protect classmate Wang Ling. At the very least, I'll make sure he survives this competition and stands until the end. Wang Ling. At that moment, Wang Ling suddenly felt, this competition, seemed to have been led astray by Gu Xuanji and his gang. Chapter 1162. The night of the first day could be considered peaceful. All the participating schools had found their own allies and were competing for resources on the nearby mountain peaks. After the first day, there were only 421 participants left. As Wang Ling had expected, on the first day of the competition, all the schools had chosen to form an alliance of 4 to 5 schools to occupy 9 mountain peaks. As for the remaining schools that hadn't formed an alliance, even if they managed to survive the first day, they might naturally be eliminated if they didn't find a team to distribute enough resources to. This was just the first day, and the situation wasn't truly favorable. Number 60 High and all the other participating schools could be eliminated at any time. After all, on the last day of the survival battle, the ranking would be based on the order of death, and the school that survived to the end would be the king. Before that, anything could happen. Even if they chose to form an alliance, it would only be because of the current circumstances. There was no such thing as an ally in the truest sense, at least, that was what Wang Ling had thought before the Wang Ling fan club was set up. There were now 5 schools in number 60 High's camp. Currently, they had adopted a defensive strategy, but defense alone wasn't enough, they still had to send people out to gather resources and spy on information. Thus, Lotus Sun suggested that each school pick 2 people to form a resource collection team of 10 people every day to gather resources and gather intelligence. Number 60 High had a natural advantage in this regard. Thanks to Mysterious Sea's 3D water screen map, it could be said that the entire 9 Dragon Mountain could be seen at a glance. Furthermore, with Nanishio's perception ability, the water screen map now had the ability to detect living beings, and any activity within a 30-li radius would be displayed on the map. To ensure that everyone wouldn't get lost in the process of searching for resources, Lotus Sun had also used the gathered materials to create temporary map talismans. When necessary, this talisman could be used to project the map in a location with water for 30 seconds. But Lotus Sun wouldn't be able to draw such a convenient tool on her own, so a temporary talisman team had been set up in number 60 High's alliance camp to be responsible for drawing talismans. And Wang Ling was a member of this team. Brother Wang, it's too dangerous outside. Just stay here and draw the talismans. In the camp, Zhu Hanyun looked at Wang Ling affectionately in front of a temporarily set-up table. Wang Ling, compared with all kinds of dangerous gathering and spying activities in the outside world, drawing talismans was indeed a much more ideal method for him. He could contribute to the team, but he could also loiter around in the base like a nobody, which was pretty good. But it never occurred to Wang Ling that he hadn't made this decision on his own, and that everyone had directly decided that he would stay in the Dao Talisman team. In addition to the map display talisman used to display maps, there were actually many other types of talismans. For example, the enhancement talisman used to strengthen weapons. This was a spell that could temporarily change the material of a weapon. That was to say, even if you didn't have a weapon in your hand, you could still use a branch or a bamboo as a weapon. After using the weapon enhancement charm, you could transform the temporary material of the branch into steel. That way, they would have a certain amount of combat power. If the strengthening talisman was used on a spirit sword or magic treasure, it would double the lethality of the spirit sword or magic treasure. In addition, there were fireball talismans, smoke talismans, water dragon talismans, invisibility talismans, chi-holding talismans, and other talismans used for self-defense and spying. Of course, drawing talismans wasn't difficult for him. But the problem was, the talisman he drew, even when he was trying his best to control it. Their strength would also be very different from that of ordinary Foundation establishment students. November 16th, Sunday. On the second day of the survival battle, the number on the main peak of the dome hadn't changed since it was fixed at 421 people. Wang Ling predicted that for the next 1 or 2 days, the schools would probably continue to spy on each other in secret, and wouldn't launch a large-scale battle, much less cause a huge number of casualties like on the first day. The next day, Number 60 High drew lots for Super Chin and Wang Zhen to go out as representatives to gather resources and carry out reconnaissance activities. Nan Yixio was in charge of leading the team. We'll split into 2 groups. One group will gather resources, and the other will scout for information. The resource-gathering team would be relatively safer. They would only move around nearby and pay attention to using talismans to conceal themselves. It would not be easy for them to be discovered. However, spying is very dangerous. Is there anyone willing to go with me? Nan Yixio asked as she looked at the 10 people in front of her. Since Nan Yixio had decided to take part in the spying operation, another student from South Sea Sky High would naturally follow him. This was a bespectacled guy with a watermelon haircut, who gave Super Chin an air of rigidity. Let's call them 4 Eyes for now. We'll sign up. Super Chin volunteered. It wasn't easy for Super Chin to participate in the national competition, and loitering around in the base was the most boring thing for him. Wang Zhen felt that this was in line with Super Chen's hot-blooded youngster character. In any case, it was Gu Xuanji who had decided on number 60 High's team. Although it looked like a draw, it was actually controllable. If Wang Zhen went with Super Chin, there basically wouldn't be any risk. Furthermore, Wang Zhen actually really wanted to see what the Foundation establishment cultivators on Earth were like in actual combat. Thus, Wang Zhen directly agreed to Super Chen's request. I have no objections. Spying was a little dangerous, and Nan Yixio had thought that it would be very difficult to gather enough people. In the end, Super Chin and Wang Zhen unexpectedly volunteered, which delighted Nan Yixio. A 4-person spying team was just right. If there were too many people, they wouldn't be able to take care of everyone. After happily deciding on the groups, the 2 groups split up. The closest mountain to Fire Peak was Mist Peak, which Nan Yixio had been eyeing since early on. There's a very familiar smell on Mist Peak. Wang Zhen asked tentatively as he followed Nan Yixio. He could more or less guess Nan Yixio's true purpose. I found out yesterday that number 1 Devil Subduing High's Gao Tianming has formed an alliance with 4 schools to occupy that place, Nan Yixio said. Do you have a grudge? Wang Zhen asked again. No, it's just that this person is a little tricky. He's very close to us and could launch a surprise attack at any time. Also, given Gao Tianming's character, I'm guessing that the schools that allied with him were forced to do so. Nan Yishio frowned. He had always been worried about number 1 Devil Subduing High's virus puppet spell. This control spell was extremely powerful, and most importantly, impossible to guard against. Nan Yishio had dealt with Gao Tianming in the previous competition. He knew Gao Tianming's character too well. This person is crazy. For Gao Tianming, there were no true allies at all. Because no ally was as reliable as a puppet for him to control. Chapter 1163. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. Spying for intelligence was one of the most important tasks in this survival battle. Given the different alliances, each camp's methods of spying were different. In general, it was necessary to combine the overall advantages of each camp to maximize the benefits of spying. Number 60 High's Fire Peak Camp, represented by South Sea Sky High, practically had a natural advantage when it came to spying. Nan Yishio was an expert in the study of perception, and he knew how to use the power of nature, which made him especially handy in this natural survival battle. As they approached Mist Peak's territory, Nan Yishio, Wang Zhen, Super Chin and Four Eyes hid somewhere behind him. The wild pheasant they had caught on the way here could play a crucial role at a time like this. Mind Assimilation Spell. At that moment, Nan Yishio cast a spell and aimed his eyes at the pheasant's eyes. What's this? Super Chin was puzzled. This is senior brother Nan's best move. This spell can assimilate minds and control a living being's brainwaves. It can assimilate a living being's brainwaves. In the end, it can share sight, hearing and smell. Now, this pheasant's brain is completely connected to senior brother Nan's, Four Eyes said as he pushed up his glasses. I see. Super Chin nodded. He finally understood why Nan Yishio had caught the pheasant on the way here. It wasn't to eat it. But why a pheasant? Super Chin was still puzzled. Pheasants are the least likely to be noticed. Most insects have very special vision, and it's not easy for them to detect enemies. High-level creatures are too big, which makes them difficult to capture and control, Four Eyes answered. So to sum up, pheasants were indeed the most ideal target for assimilation in the current environment. Furthermore, wild pheasants that lived on Nine Dragon Mountain weren't ordinary chickens. They had spirit chi on them and had excellent eyesight, which was almost as good as a hawk's, and could see very far away. At that moment, Nan Yishio was controlling the pheasant. He threw it onto a branch and gazed into the distance. However, an unexpected scene occurred. A sharp arrow pierced through the clouds above the peak of Mist Peak and directly pierced through the pheasant. The pheasant had only just climbed up the tree when it was killed by an arrow on the spot, turning into a pile of minced meat. Nan Yishio had no time to react to such a horrifying scene, and his assimilation was interrupted. His face was deathly pale, and he was drenched in sweat. This was the after effect of the assimilation. Under normal circumstances, Nan Yishio would directly interrupt the assimilation before he knew there was danger. However, it had happened too suddenly, and the pain of the pheasant's death was transmitted to Nan Yishio's mind, causing him to be unable to withstand it for a moment. Their reactions are a bit fast. Super Chin was also horrified at this scene. Less than 10 seconds after the pheasant was sent up, an arrow had been shot from a distance and accurately killed the pheasant. Super Chin observed the arrow. It was a simple, homemade wooden arrowhead with some deadly poison on it. If it hit someone, the golden talisman would immediately judge them dead, and a golden barrier would erupt. However, this should not be the power of the Foundation establishment stage. One had to know that they were still at least 5 miles away from Mist Peak. In a situation where they didn't have a magic weapon like a bow and arrow, it was almost impossible to rely on a homemade bow and wooden arrow to accurately cross mountains, seas, and a sea of people to reach this place. Terrain advantage, Wang Zhen said at that moment. As soon as he said this, Super Chen immediately reacted. So it's the terrain. If the terrain advantage was taken into account, it was indeed possible to shoot from such a long distance. Mist Peak was the most difficult peak to reach. A formless airflow would be generated from the top of the mountain, blowing away all living beings that attempted to fly over the mountain in all directions. It wouldn't be difficult to shoot from a long distance by taking advantage of the special wind pressure on the terrain and archery skills. On the contrary, the wind pressure on the mountaintop was the least after reaching the top. At that moment, Nan Ishio recovered from his panic. What had happened just now had been too sudden, and he hadn't been able to recover for a moment. But he was already doing his best to adjust. Gao Tianming chose Mist Peak, which is easy to defend and hard to attack, and has a natural advantage. But the problem is that they can't stay on the mountaintop all the time. They also have to send out supply teams to gather resources. We can ambush them. But as soon as Nan Ishio said this, Super Chen noticed something new. On Mist Peak, Super Chen noticed that someone was actually releasing something that looked like kites. These kites flew in all directions due to the air pressure on the mountaintop, and a flat puppet with a bamboo basket on its back was tied to each of them. The puppet opened its mouth, and a long thin tube extended out to spit out a silk thread with a long hook attached to it. He's actually taking advantage of the terrain, using fishing to gather the spirit fruits and plants around us. Looking at this scene, Nan Ishio was deeply shocked on the spot. He had already known that Gao Tianming would be difficult to deal with, but he hadn't expected the other party to actually go this far. If he could even use puppets to gather resources, then the people from their camp could stay on the mountain and be completely self-sufficient. They didn't need to send people down the mountain to look for resources at all. Super Chen had thought that no. 60 High's defense was already impregnable, but he had never expected to run into someone who was even worse off than them. What should we do? Four Eyes broke out in cold sweat as they also felt despair. This feeling of helplessness wasn't common, but judging from the usual interactions between South Sea Sky High and No. 1 Devil Subduing High, this was clearly the trickiest. Gao Tianming had accumulated a wealth of experience in previous battles, and was also constantly learning and growing. Now, he had finally reached a jaw-dropping level in terms of tactical arrangements. Nan Ishio gritted his teeth a little unwillingly. Just like No. 60 High and No. 59 High were enemies, South Sea Sky High and No. 1 Devil Subduing High also had deep grudges against each other. This was already Nan Ishio's third confrontation with Gao Tianming since he had met him. The first two had ended in a draw, but this time, Nan Ishio felt that he was clearly at a disadvantage. Let's change positions first. I'm afraid they've already discovered us. Nan Ishio frowned. These kite puppets, which had been released from the mountaintop to gather resources, could also monitor their surroundings. Nan Ishio wasn't sure whether or not Gao Tianming had discovered them, but based on that snip just now, their position had definitely been exposed. Did they bring these kite puppets in? Wang Zhen asked. I'm sure they did. This kind of puppet with such a long hook, it would take a few days to make one, Nan Ishio said with a nod. How about this, I'll use my body to lure them, and you guys think of a way to cut their lines. We'll deal with as many as we can, Wang Zhen suddenly said at that moment. You're going to lure them? The other three were horrified. Wang Zhen smiled helplessly. Don't worry, don't look at me like this. I grew up with them, and they're very sturdy. Chapter 1164. In chapters 802 and 803, Wang Zhen's nightmares after he was injured brought him back to his miserable childhood. As a man who had been beaten since he was a child, from the very beginning when he was beaten by his wife and his wife, to the tools he chose to use to beat himself up, Wang Zhen's experiences could only be described as legendary. Because of his special constitution of being able to withstand beatings and awakening after being beaten, Wang Zhen's body had been tortured by all kinds of tools. A god-beating whip as thick as a cola bottle, a meteor hammer covered in 36,000 spikes, a skull-crushing stone forged from king iron. Wang Zhen had survived the torture of these tools. His miserable childhood and the pressure of life hadn't completely crushed him, and he later realized a truth. He might be a natural warrior, and should charge at the very front as a meat shield. Thus, when Wang Zhen decided to use his body to attract the enemy's attention, the people behind him looked at his back and felt that he was unprecedentedly handsome. "This is for you." Wang Zhen took off his life-saving golden talisman and gave it to Nan Yishou. "For me." Nan Yishou couldn't believe it. Logically speaking, if Wang Zhen wanted to give it to someone, it should be Super Chin. Super Chin was from number 60 high. Logically speaking, he shouldn't give it to an outsider like him. Even if they were in an alliance, it didn't make sense to give him such an important life-saving golden talisman. "If you give it to me, what will you do?" "It's too dangerous," Nan Yishou declined. "It's fine, they can't hurt me." Wang Zhen smiled confidently. "I'm giving it to you because I trust you. If something really goes wrong, don't worry about me, just think of a way to evacuate with Super Chin and the four-eyed man." Nan Yishou was touched by this feeling of being trusted. He no longer hesitated, and directly reached out to take the golden talisman. Since he had taken it, he had a responsibility and a mission. Nan Yishou was a responsible and reliable person. Wang Zhen had long since noticed this. As someone from the domain of the gods, it was impossible for him to not have the ability to peer into a person's heart. Strictly speaking, this was also one of Wang Zhen's special talents. Because he had grown up experiencing all kinds of violence and malice, Wang Zhen was especially sensitive to malice, and could sense the labels in the depths of a person's heart. For example, Wang Zhen had seen labels like upright, courageous, witty, and reliable for Nan Yishou. For example, the labels Wang Zhen saw for Lu Qingyi were violent, tsundra, kind, charming. For example, Gu Xuanji had very few labels: scheming, keeper of order. Because of Gu Xuanji's special identity and the fact that Wang Zhen's strength was partly suppressed by heavenly Tao, Wang Ling couldn't clearly see all of Gu Xuanji's tags. Under normal circumstances, he could see at least 4 labels in the depths of other people's hearts. Sometimes, there would be a dozen or even 20 of them. Of course, there were also people who could not feel the label. For example, Wang Zhen remembered that when he had checked the tags, Wang Ling's tag had been like this. After discussing their strategy with Nan Yishou, Wang Zhen charged forward without a care for his own safety. Although he was sure that Gao Tianming, who was at the foundation establishment stage, wouldn't be able to harm his body, there was no way he would use his body to block the attack in public. That would be too obvious. So while Wang Zhen had gone there with the intention of using his body to taunt Gao Tianming, he still wanted to use his own reflexes to avoid the attack. How fast could a foundation establishment cultivator's attack be? He would be able to react in time. Furthermore, even if he was hit, it wouldn't hurt much, like a mosquito bite. Back then, when he had been hit by the god-beating whip, he hadn't even cried out. After advancing another 4 li, Wang Zhen was less than 1 li away from the foot of Mist Peak. Such an obvious target had naturally already been noticed by the students on the mountaintop. Several sharp arrows shot at Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen's dynamic vision was simply overkill in front of a foundation establishment cultivator, and when the arrows came at him, he felt as if they were moving at a speed that was 1,000 times slower than before. Wang Zhen casually dodged to the side and perfectly avoided them. This posture was a little like Wang Ling's. During his days on Earth, Wang Zhen had often thought about his battles with Wang Ling, and had also subconsciously imitated Wang Ling's more subtle movements. Unfortunately, although he was imitating them, he couldn't grasp Wang Ling's essence. On the mountaintop, Gao Tianming had already noticed what was going on down below. "Captain Gao, we've found someone from number 60 high," a Stars High School student said expressionlessly as he stepped forward. The entire Star Do High School had already been controlled by Gao Tianming's virus puppet spell, and the entire 10-man team was now under his control. As far as Gao Tianming was concerned, these people were nothing more than tools under his command. He stared at Wang Jin at the foot of the mountain with a profound expression in his eyes, and then sank into deep thought. Gao Tianming took out a photo from his pocket, and after comparing it with a puppet with a telescopic function, he confirmed that the person at the foot of the mountain was Wang Jin himself. Someone had found him a while ago and given him a photo. The people in the photo were all from number 60 high school: Wang Zhen, Lu Qingyi, Gu Xuanji, Jin Yuan, Jin Yuan, and Fang Xing. Gao Tianming didn't know where these people came from, but after the person had given him the photo, he had been asked to severely injure these targets as much as possible in this competition. Of course, severely injuring these big shots was easier said than done. Given Gao Tianming's original strength, it was naturally difficult. Thus, that person gave Gao Tianming a frozen dumpling. "What's this?" Gao Tianming couldn't believe his eyes. "Something that can permanently increase your strength for a short period of time," the mysterious man in the white cloak said to him. "Dumpling? This isn't an ordinary dumpling. It was almost destroyed, but I managed to recover quite a bit of it from the remains. Eat it, and you'll have a foothold in the world." Before Gao Tianming had eaten the dumpling, he had thought that the person in front of him might be an out-and-out psychopath. But while the person's words were Chinibyu, they carried a very demonic power. Gao Tianming felt like he couldn't control his hands as he grabbed a dumpling and ate it. At that moment, Wang Jin still didn't know that the person he was facing wasn't an ordinary Foundation establishment cultivator. Gao Tianming had been concealing his strength during the test. He had obtained the power of Shadow Dao, and under the guidance of the mysterious person who had given him the dumpling, he had learned to control his shadow. As long as he put it away, he could perfectly suppress his strength. And now, it was time to release his shadow. Gao Tianming knew that he had already become very strong, but in the end, he still wanted to find an opponent to test it out on. In any case, he would only severely injure the other party, not kill them. This was what Gao Tianming thought in his heart. Then, he would release his shadow. The sudden danger made all the hair on Wang Jin's body stand on end. He actually sensed the scent of death. Chapter 1165. As an outstanding meat shield, Wang Jin boasted that there weren't many attacks that could truly make him tremble, not to mention that this was a competition between Foundation establishment cultivators. Wang Jin hadn't been that serious to begin with, and never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that a Foundation establishment high school student could burst out with such frightening strength. This wasn't a level that a Foundation establishment cultivator should have. He saw a puppet charging at him at top speed. This was a puppet made of fine steel. It was very large and 2 meters tall, and its broad body was like a roly-poly toy. As it charged, there was the irritating sound of gears turning, and the steel wings on its back cut through the air like a cat scratching a blackboard. Every puppeteer had their own exclusive puppet, and Gao Tianming's puppet was called Splitter, which cut through the air as it attacked. With the smile of a rag doll that could be seen in horror movies, it opened its steel teeth and swallowed Wang Jin. Wang Jin wasn't afraid of this level of attack. As one of the most outstanding meat shield warriors in the domain of the gods, Wang Jin directly chose to meet force with force. He wanted to see what secrets this puppet, which had been strengthened by this mysterious power, was hiding. But when Wang Jin's fist collided with Splitter's teeth, a black shadow suddenly descended, and Wang Jin felt a powerful attractive force. In the next second, darkness descended. When he came back to his senses, the scene in front of him was no longer in Nine Dragon Mountain. It was a wasteland filled with shadows. He couldn't hear a single sound, only a disgusting feeling lingering around his body. The smell of blood and gore filled his five senses, making him feel like he was tied up and sunk into a pool of blood. Was he in the stomach of that splitter just now? No, Wang Zhen felt that things were far from being as simple as he had imagined. He was convinced that the place he was in was a different world, an existence similar to a small world. It was simply impossible for a building foundation stage cultivator to possess this kind of power. Furthermore, this world was really too dark. A cultivator's small world was mostly constructed by the nomological laws of heavenly Tao. Before Wang Zhen's power was restricted, he had his own small world. In a small world, there could be mountains and rivers, forests and deserts, and life. To use a more appropriate analogy, Wang Zhen felt that a true small world was like a player's manor system in a game. After the nomological construction was complete, you could freely decorate your own manor, plant flowers and raise animals. However, this alternate world in front of him was unimaginably dark. All of a sudden, Wang Zhen recalled something that Wang Ling had mentioned before, shadow image space. Could this be the shadow image space that had been formed under the influence of Ling Zhenren's little sister? He knew that Wang Ling had expended a lot of energy to deal with the frozen dumplings that had been on the run recently. Wang Zhen had thought that he had already solved the problem, but he hadn't expected to run into it again here. At that moment, Wang Zhen was sure that he had already been swallowed into the shadow image space, and the way to break free was to find the inner demon in the shadow image space, defeat it and disintegrate it from the inside. Just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his body. His entire body was turning into wood. He had become a wooden puppet. Then, threads as fine as gossamer threads fell from the sky and connected to his body one after another. Wang Zhen realized that he had already lost all control of his body, and had completely turned into a marionette. Spurred on by this mysterious force, Wang Zhen walked step by step toward a palace. This was the only palace in the entire shadow image space. Wang Zhen was surprised to find that there were other people here who had become puppets like him. Many of them were students participating in the competition this time. All of their bodies were suspended by threads, and their bodies moved according to the will of this world. A force led Wang Zhen to a resource area. His completely uncontrollable body picked up the bricks piled on the ground, and then moved toward a wall that had yet to be completed. A puppet in front of Wang Zhen accidentally fell, and the brick in its hand shattered when it hit the ground. "Don't defy my will." Gao Tianming's faint voice came from the space. An invisible whip lashed out at the puppet that had made a mistake, and a layer of sawdust and a strong smell of blood flew out of the puppet. In that instant, Wang Zhen suddenly understood. This palace was the sweatshop of all the people who had been forcibly turned into puppets. Is this the power of Shadow Dao? Wang Zhen was amazed. Shadow image world, and the unique power of each shadow image world. Wang Zhen knew that he was probably trapped. Now, he needed to think of a way to let people know where on earth he was trapped. According to the plan he had originally discussed with Wang Zhen, Nan Yixio was going to take Super Qin to cut off the threads of the kite puppets to prevent Gao Tianming from fishing for resources. But halfway there, Nan Yixio's expression suddenly turned serious. Something's not right. Classmate Wang Zhen's aura has suddenly disappeared. This situation made Nan Yixio's hair stand on end. There were only 3 possibilities for a person's aura to suddenly disappear from the map. 1. He was deliberately hiding his aura. This was unlikely to happen, because according to the original plan, Wang Zhen was going to act as a meat shield to taunt the other party, and he would love nothing more than for his aura to be captured by the other party. 2. He had fallen into a mysterious space. It could be a free spell, or it could be a small world or something like that. But the problem was, How could an almighty who could open a small world appear in a foundation establishment competition? The last and third possibility was the one Nanisho didn't want to believe the most, death. On the other side, in number 60 High's camp, Lu Qingyi felt a little uneasy. At the beginning, she had sensed that Wang Zhen's aura seemed to have disappeared from the entire Nine Dragon Mountain map. But that didn't rule out the possibility that Wang Zhen had hidden his aura for the sake of carrying out the mission. This idiot, could he even make a mistake in a foundation establishment competition? Lu Qingyi was a little worried. She didn't like Wang Zhen. When she had fled to Earth to escape marriage, she had even hoped countless times that this hateful guy would die. But now, Heavenly Tao had punished her and Wang Zhen by restricting part of their strength, and they were trapped on Earth, living the lives of others. She realized that Wang Zhen actually wasn't as annoying as she had thought. At the same time, Wang Ling's expression gradually turned serious. If his judgment was correct, what had just happened was indeed the aura of Shadow Dao. He had already wiped out all those frozen dumplings, but there were still remnants. Wang Ling frowned slightly. He had reason to believe that the disappearance of Wang Zhen's aura had something to do with this Shadow Dao aura. Let's go take a look. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He had always been someone who was afraid of trouble. But when all was said and done, this was his little sister's fault. It was a brother's duty to clean up his little sister's mess. Chapter 1166. The 12 kite puppets responsible for collecting resources operated according to his will. As he collected resources, he could use the kite puppets to look into the distance and enjoy the beautiful scenery at the foot of Mist Peak. This feeling of looking down on all the mountains made him feel, for the first time, the pleasure of standing at a high place and obtaining infinite power. The feeling of having power was indeed wonderful. For Gao Tianming, Shadow Dao was like a piece of chocolate that his body had been craving for sugar for a long time. It gave him a strong sense of satisfaction both mentally and physically. Shadow Dao, Shadow Image, and the unique Shadow Image ability that had been activated, Gao Tianming had no idea that there was such a magical power in this world. He didn't know how he could lose the competition with this special ability. He could use Shadow Image to bring people into the Shadow Image space, and then forcibly transform them into his puppets who would work in the space. In the long run, his Shadow Image space could expand without limit, and thus accommodate more puppets. And these people who had been turned into puppets would become stumbling blocks on his road to success. For Gao Tianming, these puppets were like rewards from a claw fishing machine in the mall. Not only would they become employees in his puppet factory, but they would also become unique collectibles. "Captain, there seems to be someone at the foot of the mountain." At that moment, a voice sounded in Gao Tianming's ear. The speaker was the deputy captain of No. 1 Devil Subduing High School, Xie Ming, a man with naturally curly, blonde hair. Xie Ming had also become Gao Tianming's puppet. But Gao Tianming still held back when it came to his classmates. He didn't include them in his puppet factory. After the competition was over, Gao Tianming would release all the students from No. 1 Devil Subduing High School. It was too dangerous to let them act according to his own thoughts. It would be better to turn them into his puppets and let him control them. That way, he would be able to win the competition smoothly. Because of the lush vegetation around Nine Dragon Mountain, Gao Tianming was worried that there might be a blind spot that he couldn't cover, so he had sent a professional chess piece like Xie Ming to hide at the foot of the mountain as a human guard. Once he discovered the enemy, he could quickly use the kite puppet's threads to fish them back to the top of the mountain to report the situation. Thus, Gao Tianming was very surprised when he heard Xie Ming's report. He had already noticed that the coward Nan Yishu had run away with the scouts. Then, who else would come? Titan High's Xu Hanyun. Or No. 60 High's Lotus Sun. Gao Tianming imagined his opponents in his mind. Judging from the first round of the knockout round, he felt that the strength of these two people was close to his own. If it was Zhu Hanyun, he could take advantage of the situation to subdue him and turn him into a puppet, using him as a meat tank. If it was Lotus Sun, Gao Tianming felt that if it really was Lotus Sun, he would turn her into his puppet. Gao Tianming still had plans to become the son-in-law of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, and the reason why he was working so hard was that one day he could rival Lotus Sunday. Sometimes, a person's birth determined the starting line. Gao Tianming had to admit that he was too late to start. But if he worked harder, he might be able to catch up. In Gao Tianming's eyes, the powerful abilities he had obtained were the best proof of his hard work. However, when he dispatched the kite puppets to observe the person at the foot of the mountain, Gao Tianming's expression abruptly changed. He had guessed wrong. This person wasn't Zhu Hanyun or Lotus Sunday. It was number 60 high, someone he couldn't think of no matter what. This person is... Gao Tianming tried his best to recall this expressionless young man with a pair of dead fish eyes who had climbed Mist Peak from the foot of the mountain. The wind pressure on Mist Peak blew his loose school uniform up and down, causing it to flutter in the wind. The teenager moved with ease as he faced the enormous wind pressure and advanced steadily. Mist Peak could be divided into 4 stages from the foot of the mountain to the top. The first stage was the stable stage, during which the wind pressure was moderate and similar to that of a typhoon. The second stage was the transition stage, during which the wind pressure was more violent than that of a typhoon. Cultivators who needed to reach the top would use the absorption ability of spirit energy to firmly anchor their feet to the ground and advance step by step. If there was insufficient spirit energy in this stage, it was very likely that they would be overturned halfway up the mountain. The third stage was known as the hellish windstorm. At its peak, the wind pressure could weigh more than 12 tons. It was like a truck falling from the top of a mountain, constantly pressing on one's shoulders. Without any assistance, one's life might even be in danger. The fourth stage was the safe stage. Because of Mist Peak's unique geographical location, only the top of the mountain had 0 wind pressure. But as someone who had already reached the top, when Gao Tianming saw Wang Ling stroll through the second stage in such a relaxed manner like an old man strolling through his back garden, and even in the third stage, Hell's Phoenix Mist, it was simply inconceivable to Gao Tianming. He's actually not affected in the slightest by such strong wind pressure. But very quickly, Gao Tianming noticed something off about Wang Ling. He saw that talismans were actually burning non-stop on Wang Ling's right hand. That was a huge number of wind-stabilizing talismans. As long as he had these talismans, he would be able to stand tall in a typhoon. So it's not because of his strength. The sharpness in Gao Tianming's eyes gradually faded as he stared at Wang Ling, who was burning the wind-stabilizing talismans non-stop at the foot of the mountain, and he couldn't help sneering in his heart. In his opinion, this was just a weirdo who was about to throw his life away. Admittedly, there was no need for Wang Ling to use the wind-stabilizing talismans. The wind pressure of this mere Mist Peak couldn't crush him. But considering that this was a competition, and that someone might be paying attention to their movements at any time, Wang Ling decided to play it safe and use the talismans to conceal his true strength. In this way, it would look like he was borrowing the power of the talismans. After successfully reaching the top of the mountain, the wind on the mountaintop calmed down, and Wang Ling naturally didn't need to continue burning the talismans. With one hand in his trouser pocket, he walked in Gao Tianming's direction. At such a close distance, he could already sense the evil power emanating from Gao Tianming's body. This wasn't because the power of Shadow Dao was evil. It was because Shadow Dao stimulated the evil in a person's heart and awakened their inner demons. If you were a good person who had socialist core values, who was well-rounded in all aspects of morality, intelligence, physique, beauty, and labor, then not only would you obtain the formidable power of Shadow Dao, you wouldn't be eroded by evil. Chapter 1167. The dual nature of Shadow Dao was a fatal flaw that made it easier for evil people to take advantage of it. But Wang Ling felt that this flaw could be completely fixed. After all, Nuan hadn't been born yet. Although she might be the strongest embryo on Earth or even in the universe right now, her ability to control Shadow Dao was definitely still very limited. As long as Nuan grew up and got rid of the evil side of Shadow Dao, it would still be a Dao that could benefit all of humanity. Wang Ling wasn't sure whether Wang Nuan would go berserk like him after birth because she couldn't control her strength, but he was sure that Father and Mother Wang's guidance wouldn't change. As her big brother who had experienced the pain of losing control, the only thing he could do was help Nuan avoid some detours. Ascending to the top by burning talismans. Number 60 High is really full of capable people. Everyone in the command center had noticed the activity on the top of Mist Peak as they watched this scene unfold in front of them. Earlier, the image of Wang Jin being swallowed by Gao Tianming had been in a blind spot, and hadn't been captured. Until now, the command center still didn't know that Gao Tianming had become a demon. Thus, when Wang Ling appeared on the mountaintop in an attempt to rescue Wang Jin, the headmasters in the command center thought it was nothing more than an ordinary showdown between Foundation establishment cultivators. But as Wang Ling's chief disciple, Audiobook instantly understood what Wang Ling was trying to do. He knew Wang Ling's personality too well. They would not easily appear on the front lines and take action. Once he chose to make a move, he must have encountered some sort of trouble. As for burning talismans to ascend to the top, it was most likely just a cover-up. As Audiobook's disciple, even if he wasn't by Wang Ling's side and wasn't even the overall commander this time, Audiobook could almost instantly understand the task of diverting attention. He immediately gestured to the control staff on the side to cut off the image. In order to prevent this kind of situation from happening, Audiobook and grenade-throwing senior immortal had already taken over the position of the image operator, and this person had in fact been sent by the Office of Strategic Deception. Audiobook secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling cut off from the big screen. But old Wang's next words made Audiobook tense up again. What for? I remember the list saying that this Gao Tianming is the strongest freshman in number 1 Devil Subduing High, and he's also the team leader this time. His opponent was number 60 High's mascot, student Wang Ling. It should be very interesting. Audiobook, given old Wang's status as the Shifu of President Qi, one of the 10 founding generals, he could be said to be highly respected in the cultivation world, so it was impossible for Audiobook to not have good judgment. As soon as old Wang spoke, he immediately knew that he had no choice but to switch back. Fortunately, Audiobook still had Plan B. This was also Wang Ling's backup plan, which was to prevent the scene from cutting back. However, the scene they saw wasn't the real battle scene. At that moment, in a studio in Songhai City, Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo, this pair of slightly chubby buffoons, were already fully prepared. They had already gotten ready the moment the scene had cut off for the first time. In any case, they were both mighty beings of the transformation stage, so it was not difficult for them to imitate the duel between two Foundation establishment stage cultivators. The studio here had a real-time projection effect, which could project the panoramic view of Mist Peak into the studio. The extremely realistic construction of the scene made it almost impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. What Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo needed to do was use the transformation spell to change into Gao Tianming and Wang Ling's appearances. Then, he used all kinds of small props prepared in advance to perform in real time. Fatty Luo had prepared these props early in the morning. Grenade-throwing senior immortal had previously investigated and obtained a complete list of magic treasures which students from various major schools might smuggle into the competition. The puppet from number 1 Devil Subduing High was on the list. Now that it was Wang Ling and Gao Tianming's duel, Fatty Luo immediately transformed into Gao Tianming, put on the clothes which he had prepared beforehand, and took out the puppet prop which he had personally developed. His Fatty Luo hardware had been open for so long, and he had taken orders for all kinds of strange magic treasures, so naturally he had this kind of puppet. Hence, making puppets was not a difficult task for Fatty Luo. Fatty Luo, isn't this puppet of yours a little too exquisite? When Boss Luo took out the puppet which he had designed, Dharmaraja was completely stupefied. Rather than calling it a puppet, he felt that it would be better to directly call it an exquisite figurine. Not only had it been painted and colored from top to bottom, even its figure had been configured according to the golden ratio. The most important thing was that it was dressed in clothes, and was so exquisite that even its knuckles could move freely. Fatty Luo, Dharmaraja, you don't understand. Puppets also need to be aesthetically pleasing. In any case, I'm a magic treasure designer. I really can't bring out a crude and ugly puppet which a foundation establishment junior like Gao Tianming is using. Dharmaraja, I understand that, but the problem is, why does your puppet look like Lord Jinka? Fatty Luo, nonsense. Only Lord Jinka is worthy of me taking him so seriously. Be careful when you fight me later. Don't break my figurines, oh no, my puppets. In any case, it's just an act, so don't go overboard. Dharmaraja, then do you have any other puppets? Change to another one. Fatty Luo, yes. I'll change to another one now, don't regret it. Dharmaraja suddenly had a bad feeling. At that moment, as the two of them were talking, Audiobook sent a signal from the command center. The scene was about to be cut back. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo were ready for battle, and instantly entered Oscar Best Actor mode. There was no doubt that this was an exchange between two acting masters. Wang Ling, played by Dharmaraja, looked expressionlessly at Gao Tianming, played by Fatty Luo. Dharmaraja didn't speak, because he knew that Ling Jinren had always been a man of few words, and if he spoke too much, it would be easy for him to give himself away. But as for Gao Tianming, because Fatty Luo didn't know him very well, he could only rely on himself to act. Thus, when Old Huang and the headmasters in the command center saw the scene in the studio, everyone's eyes were instantly subdued by the puppet behind Fatty Luo. It was just a scene. Why did student Gao's puppet style change so much? Old Huang was puzzled. He remembered that Gao Tianming's puppets were rather crude and terrifying. Young people, it's actually very normal to have one or two exquisite puppets by your side. President Qi laughed on the side. But I didn't expect student Gao Tianming's style to be so different. Maybe he's a nerd. A nerd. Old Huang gradually frowned, and he couldn't help looking at Li Qingxi, the headmaster of No. 1 Devil Subduing High. Headmaster Li, I didn't expect a student from your school to have this side. As a puppet master, you can actually see a certain personality in a puppet. As the headmaster, Li Qingxi was also stupefied as he stared at the sexy and graceful puppet behind Fatty Luo on the screen. He remembered that his student Gao Tianming didn't have this style at all. What on earth had happened the moment the scene had cut back just now? These were the puppets that Fatty Luo had replaced in the second before the scene had changed. They were made entirely of imitation human skin, and had a nickname, human puppets. Furthermore, they were completely naked, without even a scrap of cloth. Thus, the entire command center now knew that No. 1 Devil Subduing High's Gao Tianming wasn't satisfied. Chapter 1168. Actually, Audiobook had always felt that Fatty Luo and Dharmaraja had talent for acting. Although the two of them were faking it and weren't punching each other, it still looked very realistic. There was the sound of a foundation establishment cultivator punching. The only thing that didn't fit was the completely different puppet behind Fatty Luo. This was actually a way of contrasting the two. It was like in a detective mystery movie, where the brilliant Sherlock Holmes would be paired with a Watson who kept asking questions. A large part of the reason why Fatty Luo had chosen to destroy Gao Tianming's character was actually to set off Ling Jinren's temperament. In particular, in contrast, Wang Ling really looked like an ordinary foundation establishment student. Furthermore, Fatty Luo deliberately held back and didn't hit Dharmaraja. It looked as if Dharmaraja, who was playing Wang Ling, was using all kinds of fancy drifting moves, so nimble that it was breathtaking. In a split second, everyone was deeply attracted to Dharmaraja, who was playing Wang Ling. Seeing this, all the headmasters couldn't help praising him. I don't know why, but I feel that this student from number 60 high has an extraordinary temperament, and is very lovable. Wonderful, wonderful. Look at his nimble body technique. He doesn't lose his rhythm when he moves. He can still breathe so calmly in the midst of such violent and repeated changes in position. This kind of rhythm is even better than that of a cultivator with a higher realm. That's right, I agree. Also, did you see that when student Wang Ling was fighting student Gao Tianming, his hair seemed to be standing on end? Stand on end. It wasn't blown by the wind. Look carefully. Classmate Wang Ling was clearly using a lightning-imbued spell that could increase the damage done in close combat. The electric currents coursing through classmate Wang Ling's body could stimulate his 8 extraordinary meridians even in the middle of a fight, causing his strength to rise continuously. Who would have thought that this student from number 60 high, who looks so mediocre, would have such a clear battle mentality? Student Wang Ling is indeed handsome. His hair is standing on end because of the electric current, and he looks like a super scion. Can't help it, he's just a foil to his peers. As the headmasters discussed this, the person who was hurt the most was naturally number 1 Devil Subduing High's headmaster, Li Qingxi. Headmaster Li Qingxi hadn't expected Gao Tianming, who was usually the most sedate person in their school, to suddenly release himself during the competition. He was a boy, after all. He was in his hot-blooded adolescence, and he didn't have a girlfriend. In fact, it was very normal for him to have this kind of thing. But the problem was that you couldn't use it in the competition. Li Qingxi lowered his head and covered his face. As the headmaster, he could not bear to watch the duel in front of him. For a moment, he felt as if he had been reduced to dust. On the side, number 60 high school's headmaster Qin was actually amused. He had already seen that number 1 Devil Subduing High's Gao Tianming was the most difficult to deal with among this batch of students, and he had been worried that Gao Tianming would steal the limelight from number 60 high school students. Who would have thought that his persona would suddenly collapse, and everyone in the command room was amused. Moreover, no one chose to take the initiative to ridicule Principal Li Qingxi at this time. This was the most fatal. At this moment, silence spoke louder than words. Sneering in the dark can sometimes hurt people more than saying it out loud. On the other side, the confrontation between the real Wang Ling and Gao Tianming was still going on. Gao Tianming was clearly a little astonished by Wang Ling's overly calm performance. After obtaining the power of Shadow Dao, his puppets had fused with the power of a shadow image, and were almost inherently intimidating. Even after Wang Zhen's strength was restricted by Heavenly Dao, his battle strength was only at itinerant immortal level, and his hair stood on end when he was intimidated by Gao Tianming's puppets. However, the youngster in front of him only slightly ruffled his bangs, so your number 60 high's hidden core. Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling with a particularly solemn expression. He even had reason to suspect that Wang Ling wasn't just at the foundation establishment stage. In that instant, Gao Tianming recalled what Whitehair had said when he had given him the frozen dumplings. Whitehair had told him that if he ran into a guy with dead fish eyes, he should avoid fighting him as much as possible. And now, this dead fish eye had appeared in front of Gao Tianming. When a person suddenly obtained power after longing for it for a long time, they would become inflated. Gao Tianming was a typical example. Wang Ling had already sensed Gao Tianming's intentions when he had climbed to the top of Mist Peak. The other party didn't look like he was going to escape at all. Gao Tianming wasn't very old this year, and was only 16 years old like Wang Ling. But after fusing with the power of Shadow Dao, his cultivation had increased by more than 16 years. His current cultivation was close to 3,000 years. He was stronger than a high-level itinerant immortal, and infinitely close to a true immortal. It had to be noted that the average strength of the headmasters in the command center was only slightly above the soul formation stage. Only a handful of headmasters were at the itinerant immortal level. This was why Wang Yuan's Shadow Dao was so terrifying. It could instantly elevate a foundation establishment cultivator to such a frightening level. Wang Ling had once thought that his unborn little sister might be joking with him. This kind of leap in realm was really a little too exaggerated. But Wang Ling was very willing to make a move this time. Because in his opinion, Gao Tianming was indeed someone worthy of careful study. Gao Tianming was also a person who had fused with the power of Shadow Dao, and had fused it very thoroughly. Furthermore, it was all within his control. The people who had eaten the frozen dumplings earlier had suppressed part of their strength. For example, Jing Tianxiang, who had eaten the frozen dumplings in order to clear his son's name and inadvertently increased his strength, ultimately overturning the case of magic treasure plagiarism. He hadn't dared fully release his strength, because he was worried that the power of Shadow Dao would be too strong, and would ultimately cause him to lose control of his heart and be consigned to eternal damnation. But Gao Tianming's fusion was actually better than what the previous people had encountered. Wang Ling felt that this might be because Gao Tianming himself had a certain psychological flaw. Thus, Wang Ling was deeply curious about Gao Tianming. It hadn't been easy for him to encounter someone with complete Shadow Dao form. He even wanted to study Gao Tianming's Shadow Dao space in depth and analyze what the structure of the space inside was like. But at that moment, the 12 resource collection kite puppets that Gao Tianming was controlling suddenly started to move. Like pointers, they spun at high speed the moment they received an order. Then, they opened their mouths and spat out a screen of light. This was the scene construction spell, which was combined with the power of Shadow Dao. It was similar to an advanced illusion spell, which could freeze the scene of Gao Tianming and Wang Ling's confrontation. But the truth was that there was a sealed space inside that outsiders couldn't detect. In other words, the entire space had already been locked from the inside. Furthermore, with the power of Shadow Dao, a heavenly Dao-level illusion detection spell couldn't pry into the truth at all. "You've already fallen into my hands, classmate Wang Ling." Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling and curled his lips confidently. He thought that Wang Ling was already in his pocket and that he could do whatever he wanted. But little did he know, who on earth was the one who could do whatever he wanted. Chapter 1169. The moment he faced Gao Tianming, Wang Ling had already thought of more than 3,000 ways to get rid of Gao Tianming perfectly. But Gao Tianming wasn't evil. It was just that the power of Shadow Dao had infinitely magnified the dark and distracting thoughts in his heart, so much so that it was now too late for him to recover. Wang Ling didn't intend to kill Gao Tianming, he just wanted to take back the power of Shadow Dao. As long as he did so, the darkness in Gao Tianming's heart would fade. This was the best method Wang Ling could think of before the situation really escalated. At that moment, Gao Tianming had pretended to be smart and had sealed off the entire battlefield, but he had ended up helping Wang Ling instead. With no one around to disturb him, Wang Ling could use his ability without worry. He took a step forward. It was only a single step, but a tremendous pressure instantly fell like a waterfall of the Milky Way, forming an overwhelming pressure that made it difficult for Gao Tianming to breathe. "You!" Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling, his face full of astonishment and disbelief. In his opinion, this should have been a good way to use the power of Shadow Dao to catch a turtle in a jar. But he never thought that this turtle would actually be him. This wasn't the power of a foundation establishment cultivator. "Are you and I the same kind of person?" Gao Tianming looked at the pair of red dead fish eyes in front of him and tried to confirm the look in Wang Ling's king's eye, but he couldn't get an answer. The same kind of person. Of course they were different. Although Gao Tianming's power of Shadow Dao was better, it wasn't even 1/1000th of Wang Yuan's power. Wang Ling had already analyzed Shadow Dao before. Although he wasn't very proficient at it, he had already gotten a glimpse of the basics. Wang Ling now had the support of 4 great Dao. Major Dao, Heavenly Dao. This was what Wang Ling had been born with. Divine Dao, this was what he had learned after spending 2 long minutes on Divine Dao Star. Fate Dao, this was what Wang Ling had comprehended when he had captured Bai Yuquan in prison. Shadow Dao, in order to destroy those frozen dumplings, and for the sake of his little sister Wang Yuan, Wang Ling had specially studied it. These were the 4 great Dao that Wang Ling currently mastered. In fact, there was actually another outer Dao that could make one immune to all kinds of magic attacks. However, strictly speaking, the outer Dao could not be classified as a great Dao. It was just a branch of the heavenly Dao. Previously, Bai Youquan's father, President Bai Zhi, had thought that he had mastered a great Dao, but the power of outer Dao was still far inferior to the heavenly Dao. So in summary, compared with Wang Ling, Gao Tianming's shadow Dao couldn't be considered phoenix feathers and qilin horns. It could only be considered a chicken feather, and a chick at that. Unfortunately, Gao Tianming clearly didn't know what true power was. It was just as Nan Yishu had said. Gao Tianming was a crazy man. Until the very last moment, when Gao Tianming truly felt the gap between their strengths, when he truly despaired and gave up, this person would definitely continue to make mistakes. In this world, I alone am enough. In the next moment, Gao Tianming attacked hysterically as he manipulated 2 puppets to flank Wang Ling from left and right. This was a puppet slayer that was even more lethal and faster than Splitter, which had dealt with Wang Jin previously. The more dexterous mechanism design allowed the hook-shaped golden wheels at the Slayer's waist to spin rapidly as it approached. Wang Ling could see that Gao Tianming was intent on killing him. With the power of Shadow Dao attached to them, the gears on the 2 slayers could now spin more than 100 and 300 million times per second. This kind of power was enough to split gold and break stone. It could even split a mountain in half. But this speed still couldn't compare to Wang Ling's hula hoop speed when he was 7 years old. Back then, when Wang Ling was far from being as powerful as he was now, his hula hoop speed had already reached 200 million times per second. He had even been able to directly escape gravity by hula hoop, and directly take off from the ground like a helicopter propeller, rushing out of the earth for the first time, but as the saying went, a real man doesn't boast about his past exploits. Those were all the tricks he had played when he was young, and Wang Ling disdained showing them off in front of outsiders. But it was precisely because of his hula hoop experience back then, because the hula hoop was often broken, Wang Ling later learned the skill of hula hoop in the void. Now, without the hula hoop, Wang Ling could only rely on the strength of his waist to twist and turn, and with just 10% of his strength, he could spin more than 1 billion times per second. Thus, when Gao Tianming controlled the slayers to attack, Wang Ling almost subconsciously started to twist his slender waist at a high frequency. Because the speed was so fast, Gao Tianming could actually see Wang Ling's entire body in a blurry and hazy state. As Wang Ling twisted and turned, the entire top of Mist Peak began to sway slightly, just like a high-frequency ghost animal video on Bilibili. When the 2 slayers collided with Wang Ling at a speed of 1 billion times per second, there was naturally only one outcome: death and destruction. When the slayers exploded next to Wang Ling and its parts disintegrated one by one, Gao Tianming simply couldn't believe his eyes. A gear the size of a palm fell to the ground and rolled to Gao Tianming's feet. When Gao Tianming picked it up, he was actually scalded by the heat from the gear's body. He hadn't clearly seen what Wang Ling had done at all, and his slayers had actually directly exploded just like that. What on earth did you do? Wang Ling! Gao Tianming roared angrily. He was very loud, and his volume was extremely intimidating, like a mental patient yelling hysterically at someone. But in Wang Ling's eyes, this was just incompetent rage. Physical attacks have no effect on me. This was the first time he had spoken to Gao Tianming since the start of the battle, and it could be considered a kind reminder. It was only after seeing the Slayer that Wang Ling recalled the idiotic move he had developed back then that he had seen the Slayer. It was especially idiotic when it was rotated at a low speed. But when the speed of rotation increased, others wouldn't be able to clearly see what he was doing. Moreover, his body had become a sage long ago. Even if he didn't twist his waist, the Slayers would just be seeking their own destruction if they hit him. I'm going to turn you into my collection. Gao Tianming's eyes were red as he looked at Wang Ling. Although he didn't know why Wang Ling, a foundation establishment cultivator, was as strong as him, he already had the idea of turning Wang Ling into a puppet figurine. Become my puppet, classmate Wang Ling. Gao Tianming sneered. With a snap of his fingers, his shadow gradually rose from the ground and materialized behind him. This was Gao Tianming's shadow image, a clown on strings emitting an evil aura. Chapter 1170. The evil clown, who was as tall as Gao Tianming, gave off a disgusting smell from head to toe. It had a blood-red nose, horrifying split lips, and even the moles at the corners of its eyes were like sharp blades that could cut a person's heart. It was as if it could instantly plunge a person into a terrifying atmosphere. Hanging from the puppet clown's head were 4 strings. These strings were none other than 4 pieces of intestines. The scene looked a little disgusting, but it was in fact just a psychological effect caused by the shadow image. At the same time, it also proved that Gao Tianming had sunk too deep. Once his inner demon was activated, the dark side of his heart would directly reflect on the shadow image. So, if the power of Shadow Dao was used normally, the shadow image would probably be something like a weapon spirit. It might not be as good-looking as Jinka or Mysterious Sea, but at the very least, it would be a humanoid creature that looked normal. Wang Ling frowned at the horrifying scene in front of him. His first reaction after seeing this scene was to give the remaining packets of braised intestine-flavored crispy noodle snacks at home to the Heavenly Dao as an equivalent exchange. After all, he was still a 16-year-old kid. It was inevitable that he would feel a little nauseous at this kind of scene. So now, Wang Ling was doing his best not to throw up his churning stomach acid. If a drop fell to the ground, given his stomach acid's ability, it might directly burn a hole through the earth. On the other side, looking at Wang Ling clutching his stomach, Gao Tianming thought that his threat was beginning to work. His shadow image was called Puppet Clown, and it had the effect of creating illusions and fear in people's hearts. Once you fell into it, the more you looked at it, the more terrifying it would feel. He felt that it was already impressive that Wang Ling hadn't fainted on the spot. Student Wang Ling, stop struggling. I'll definitely turn you into my collection. Gao Tianming smiled sinisterly. With a thought, several large intestines flew out of the puppet clown's abdomen to wrap around Wang Ling's limbs. He wanted to drag Wang Ling into the shadow image world. Tentacle play. Wang Ling didn't like to play tentacles with a man. He opened his king's eye and stared at the large intestines flying toward him. As he stared, these large intestines actually slowed down midway. This was the passive effect of the king's eye, don't touch me. Once Wang Ling showed a look of resistance, these unknown creatures that tried to approach him would instantly turn to ashes if they still persisted. Therefore, these large intestines instantly stopped after decelerating in midair. Under Wang Ling's king's eye, they didn't dare take half a step forward. As a shadow image, the clown puppet was controlled by Gao Tianming's will, but it also had a certain level of intelligence and wouldn't do anything to harm itself. This was because once the shadow image appeared, it would be bound to the body of the original owner. Any damage the shadow image received would be reflected back to the original owner. Gao Tianming was clearly surprised by the puppet's hesitation. He had never encountered such a situation before, and he couldn't imagine that his shadow image would actually be afraid. Not only was it synchronized on the physical level, but it was also synchronized on the mental level. At that moment, Gao Tianming could clearly sense that his clown puppet was trembling slightly with fear in its heart. In the next moment, his king's eye turned into a sharp sword that directly stabbed at the clown puppet. He used his own force to tear open the crack leading to the shadow image world. Wang Ling knew that a lot of people were still trapped in the shadow image's internal world. If he directly got rid of the clown puppet now, those people would die along with it. At this point in the battle, Gao Tianming finally deeply felt that Wang Ling's strength was almost beyond his understanding. Previously, he had controlled the shadow image to swallow people, but this person in front of him had forcibly used his own ability to tear open a crack like a roasted duck, and then stepped in. It was when Wang Ling entered the shadow image world that Gao Tianming truly felt like he had a mental breakdown. The so-called shadow image world was in fact a small world space constructed by the shadow image using its own mental energy. Now that Wang Ling had entered this small world, it was the same as forcibly stepping into this spiritual domain. When this behemoth of energy suddenly poured into the spiritual world, Gao Tianming fell to his knees with a splitting headache. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered as he curled up on the ground, clutching his head as his entire body twitched with a headache. Wang Ling had forced his way in, which would definitely cause some damage to his mind. But in terms of Dao, this was also Gao Tianming's own doing. Who told him to turn so many people into puppets and put them into his sweatshop in the shadow image world? In the puppet sweatshop, the people who had already been turned into collectibles toiled endlessly like machines. Strapped to their bodies, they carried one brick after another to where they needed to be built. They were both collectibles and cheap labor. After entering the shadow image world, Wang Ling was even more aware of how terrifying the dark power in the depths of Gao Tianming's heart was. In this puppet factory, Wang Ling could sense a power that could make people lose themselves. All the people who had been turned into puppets here had given up struggling and resisting, and their human thoughts would be extracted little by little. They would gradually forget their own names, forget the people around them, and then gradually lose all memories of being human. Most of the people who had been turned into puppets by Gao Tianming were Foundation Establishment students. Foundation Establishment cultivators had weaker minds and willpower, and were more likely to be assimilated by this spiritual world. The most severely affected people had already completely lost themselves here. Wang Ling spotted a familiar figure in the line of people carrying bricks in front of him, who was being whipped and tortured. Everything was as Wang Ling had thought. He had sensed Wang Zhen's aura disappear earlier, and sure enough, it was because Gao Tianming had plotted against him, and he had been sucked into the shadow image world to become a puppet. He saw Wang Zhen turn into a puppet on strings. It was as if he was being strung up by 4 uncontrollable steel wires, and his body was constantly working uncontrollably. Wang Ling just stood at a distance and watched this scene. He didn't know if Wang Zhen had already been assimilated, or how much of his will he still had left. But he saw that this man's eyes were different from those of the other puppets. There was a resolute look in his eyes, as if he hadn't given up thinking about how to leave this place. Until the moment when their gazes collided. Wang Zhen's spirit was suddenly shaken, and he instantly became excited. Ling Zhenren. He shouted in his heart, completely believing that Wang Ling could hear his thoughts. Wang Ling was about to praise Wang Zhen for actually not losing himself in such a terrifying shadow image world, when Wang Zhen unexpectedly said, "Ling Zhenren, you're finally here. I've been thinking about how to not lose myself in this space, so I deliberately acted lowly here and asked for a beating. The moment the whip hit me, I felt comfortable and remembered everything." Hearing this, Wang Ling slowly let out a question mark. Why did this guy sound like he was enjoying it? Chapter 1171. The reason why Wang Zhen hadn't lost himself when he was trapped in the sweatshop was that he actually enjoyed the feeling of being beaten. Wang Ling couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air when he heard this earth-shattering reason. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was in the end Wang Zhen. As a man who had been beaten up since he was a child, but who had still tenaciously survived to this day, Wang Ling couldn't help feeling deeply moved by Wang Zhen's experiences. There were so many geniuses in the world, and Wang Zhen actually hadn't started out as good as them. But after being beaten up, Wang Zhen's strong desire to survive had caused his hidden potential to burst forth, and he had finally awakened it after being beaten up round after round, and this was the reason why Wang Zhen had become stronger. A person's character was formed at a young age, and a large part of it was also because of the family environment. Wang Zhen's habit of being beaten up would probably never change in this lifetime. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that the irascible Miss Liu and Wang Zhen were really a good match. Wang Zhen was a meat shield, and Liu Qingyi was born with a fiery temper. Wang Zhen had been used to all kinds of beatings since he was a child, so his endurance was naturally better than that of an ordinary person. If these two people were together, it would be like a balance of yin and yang, but sometimes, emotional matters couldn't be forced. Wang Ling wasn't Mr. Matchmaker, and he wouldn't force his way into other people's relationships. Even if he randomly chose a couple, he had to follow the basic rules. In the next moment, Wang Ling raised his hand to cast a spell, using his current understanding of Shadow Dao to reconstruct this shadow image world. He had to finish this battle quickly, and couldn't drag things out for too long in this shadow image world. The longer he dragged things out, the greater the damage to Gao Tianming's spirit. After casting the spell for about 3 seconds, Wang Ling snapped his fingers, and all the puppets in the puppet factory in front of him were cleanly cut off. Then, their bodies began to turn into particles of light and swiftly disappear. This process was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, Wang Zhen had already returned to reality. All the rescued students were lying neatly on the ground. The change in world had put a lot of pressure on them, and shuttling back and forth had caused a lack of oxygen, which was the main reason why they had fainted. So Wang Zhen was the only one awake. At that moment, Wang Ling stretched out his hand to support Gao Tianming's forehead. Gao Tianming knelt on the ground and cried out in pain, but no one could hear his gut-wrenching voice. A few minutes later, Wang Ling pulled out a black shadow from Gao Tianming's body. It smelled of evil, and under Wang Ling's guidance, it first lingered around his fingertips before slowly coalescing in the center of his palm into a black ball the size of an egg. Finally, Wang Ling pressed down with a flip of his hand, and on the side, Wang Zhen saw several golden chains emerge from the air to lock the black ball in place before dragging it into the air. At this point, the seal was a success. Heaven Dao Lock. Wang Zhen recognized the origin of those chains. These golden chains originated from the power of the 6 main heavenly Dao. Wang Zhen had always known that Wang Ling was very strong, and that they weren't on the same level, but the appearance of the heavenly Dao lock had still startled him. Nowadays, it wasn't uncommon to see people with heavenly Dao, especially in the domain of the gods, where heavenly Dao ability users were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. But knowing heavenly Dao and understanding heavenly Dao were two different things. Those with heavenly Dao would never dare say that they understood heavenly Dao. There were countless mysteries of heavenly Dao. One universe had 3,000 heavenly Dao, and 10 universes had 30,000 heavenly Dao. Among these 30,000 heavenly Dao, it wasn't easy for some people to spend their entire lives pursuing just one and prying into the mysteries of heavenly Dao. As for the so-called Heaven Dao Lock, it was in fact a symbol of complete domination and control over the power of heavenly Dao. Ling Zhenren, who on earth are you? Wang Zhen started to feel curious about Wang Ling's identity. Wang Ling, but the truth was that even Wang Ling himself didn't know who he was. Who the hell knew why he was so strong? And the most frightening thing was that he wasn't someone who had been reborn at all. He didn't have a setting for rebirth at all. Seeing that Wang Ling had nothing to say, Wang Zhen knew that his words might have offended him, so he didn't pursue the matter. But he still had doubts about Gao Tianming. Why didn't Ling Zhenren directly destroy this evil power? Instead, he chose to seal it. Seal it. This was the best method Wang Ling could think of at the moment. He explained this to Wang Jin telepathically. Because Gao Tianming's situation was a little special, his shadow Dao was too deeply integrated. If his shadow image was directly destroyed, Gao Tianming would also die. Thus, choosing to seal it was the safest method. Gao Tianming himself wouldn't be affected by the seal, but would be unable to use the power of shadow Dao. After rescuing everyone, the first thing Wang Ling did was to use the Great Memory Spell's memory replacement ability to completely replace everyone's memories of Shadow Dao. In essence, Gao Tianming was also a victim. He wasn't a bad person by nature, but because of his intense competitiveness and desire to improve himself, he had been used by people with ulterior motives. Next, the key was to ferret out the mastermind behind the scenes. Wang Ling had initially wanted to let nature take its course. Based on his past experience, he knew that someone would definitely stir up trouble in this national competition. But he had never expected that this troublemaker would actually involve Wang Yuan's power of Shadow Dao. This immediately made Wang Ling feel a sense of crisis. The power of Shadow Dao wasn't stable yet, and abuse of it could lead to a devastating crisis. Using his unborn little sister to do bad things was something Wang Ling couldn't forgive no matter what. I need your help. At that moment, Wang Ling turned to Wang Zhen. Ling Zhenren, please speak. Wang Zhen was terrified. Wang Ling's task was very simple. He wanted Wang Zhen to be a human radar responsible for searching for other people in this competition who had the power of Shadow Dao. Wang Ling had pretty much mastered Shadow Dao, but if he used this power himself, he might lose control. So the best way was for Wang Zhen to check on his behalf. It's my duty. Wang Zhen agreed without hesitation. He didn't need to eat any frozen dumplings, and just stretched out his hand to touch Wang Zhen's forehead. In the next breath, it was as if the shadow under Wang Zhen's feet had been imbued with some kind of magic, and it visibly became three-dimensional before finally turning into a shadow image in the shape of a person. A normal shadow image was in human form. This was a burly man with very thick muscles. The burly man only wore a pair of white underpants, and the clothes on his body were quite unique. They were actually coiled ropes. This was Wang Zhen's exclusive shadow image, called Man Tied Up. After seeing the shadow image clearly, Wang Ling sighed in his heart, as expected of you. Chapter 1172. Every shadow image had its own name. The reason why a shadow image normally took the form of a human was because it represented what a person's heart longed for, and the shadow image's abilities were derived from that heart's longing. Tied Man Wang Ling used the King's Eye to test Tied Man's strength. If the shadow image was divided into 10 levels of strength, Tied Man was at level 6. Its advantages were long hands and strong growth potential. Although it was only level 6 now, if Wang Zhen used this strength properly, it was still possible for it to level up in the future. Is this my shadow image? Why does it feel so wretched? Wang Zhen stared at this muscular man wrapped in ropes and felt that what he was seeing was a little unreal. He was such an upright person, but his shadow image was actually like this. The point was that Wang Zhen thought that his sexual orientation was normal, so why was his shadow image such a muscular otaku who was even fatter than Kuxuan? The people behind the scenes are in this 9 Dragon Mountain area. If I make a move, it'll be too obvious. You're responsible for finding them. Wang Ling spoke telepathically to Wang Zhen. He had activated Wang Zhen's shadow image so that Wang Zhen could secretly search for their whereabouts. Then, Wang Ling brought over one of Gao Tianming's puppets and cast a spell called the Great Illusion spell on it. This was a real illusion that could confuse anyone's eyes. Wang Ling turned Gao Tianming's puppet into Wang Zhen's appearance. Although it looked a little wooden, it was enough to pass off as the real thing. I'll leave it to you. Wang Ling then left with this puppet which had turned into a fake Wang Zhen. Don't worry, Ling Zhenren. Wang Zhen replied after confirming their gazes. But to ensure the success of this operation, Wang Ling had arranged for 2 other people to assist Wang Jin. Thus, after Wang Jin watched Wang Ling leave the barrier, Loopy Toad and Little Silver jumped out from the side and quickly helped Wang Jin change into the Special Forces uniform. "You're not Ling Jinren's." Although Loopy Toad had already turned into a human, Wang Jin was still able to quickly recognize that the person in front of him was Loopy Toad itself, judging from its emerald green hair and its human form. "We received Master's order to help you uncover the people behind the scenes," Little Silver replied swiftly. The key now was to find out who the mastermind was. He faced Wang Jin and saw the shadow image behind him. "So this is what your shadow image looks like. It doesn't match you at all. So your heart yearns for bondage." Wang Jin was a little embarrassed. "It's all a misunderstanding, Little Silver, no need to explain, we all understand." Saying that, Little Silver also showed his shadow image. Wang Ling had helped them activate it remotely just now. Little Silver's silhouette was very normal and also in human form. This was a vigilante with waist-length hair and dead fish eyes. He wore a hood over his head and was clad in thick leather armor. However, this vigilante's weapon was neither a sword nor an arrow. Instead, it was a collar around his neck, so, the collar is a weapon. The corner of Wang Jin's mouth twitched. Apart from his more normal appearance, Little Silver's shadow image didn't seem much better. More importantly, this was a collar. This meant that Little Silver wanted to be caught in the collar. "I really want someone. It's best if it's Master who can take me for a walk on the streets." Little Silver spoke his innermost thoughts. He had always had this desire in his heart, but unfortunately, as one of the few holy beasts left in the world, Little Silver had to abide by the principle of keeping a low profile like Wang Ling. He didn't want to be hunted down and slaughtered like Dog Saint because of the rumors about the heart of a holy beast back then. The last remaining bone had been developed into the Bone King, which had fallen into Loopy Toad's hands. The power of the shadow image symbolized a person's inner desire. Thus, it wasn't too strange for a vigilante to wear a collar around his neck. It was just that Wang Jin was curious to see how it would play an actual role in a real battle. "Then let's go," Loopy Toad said at that moment. "Aren't you going to show me?" "I'll leave you with something to remember, Croak. Gao Tianming is still unconscious. What should we do?" "We'll walk out of the barrier, and the image and the command center will switch to this place. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo are acting, and the ending of the battle will be a fierce collision between Little Master Ling and Gao Tianming, which will lead to an explosion that will cause someone on Mist Peak to fall unconscious," Loopy Toad said at that moment. The script for this battle had been predetermined, and had already been arranged clearly. Thus, after Wang Jin left with Loopy Toad and Little Silver, the protective talismans on everyone on Mist Peak were triggered. As the protective golden light soared into the sky, the teachers patrolling nearby swiftly rushed over. At this point, the students from Number 1 Devil Subduing High and the other schools were eliminated. In the command center, Headmaster Li Qingxi had a vexed expression on his face. It was only the second day. Their Number 1 Devil Subduing High's hot favorite to win the championship was already gone. "Where's Wang Ling? Why can't I see classmate Wang Ling?" When the image switched back to the real scene, Headmaster Li Qingxi shouted excitedly. He stared at the scene of the search and rescue, his eyes sweeping the area for those dead fish eyes, but he couldn't find any trace of Wang Ling. "Oldly, you're anxious." On the side, Headmaster Chen smiled slightly. Obviously, if Wang Ling isn't here, it means that he was sent flying by the explosion just now, and his life isn't in danger. This is the top of Mist Peak. How can he not be in danger after being sent flying off a cliff? Headmaster Li was very agitated. He desperately hoped that Wang Ling would also be eliminated, otherwise Number 1 Devil Subduing High would lose all face. An alliance of so many schools had actually been directly wiped out by one person. This was simply unimaginable. Have you forgotten the terrain of Mist Peak? Headmaster Chen analyzed the situation. I'm guessing that student Wang Ling must have been affected by the special terrain of Mist Peak after being sent flying. The moment he fell, the nearby airflow rose up. The moment he fell, the surrounding airflow rose up, causing air resistance to increase, and in the end, he landed smoothly. How is that possible? Li Qingxi couldn't believe it. Was this the power of number 60 High's mascot? Headmaster Li slumped in his seat, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. Very quickly, Headmaster Chen's words were confirmed by a screen in the command center, because when the image switched back to number 60 High's camp, someone saw that Wang Ling had already returned to the camp with the previously missing Wang Zhen. On the screen, Wang Ling looked a little dirty. It was clear that he had just been through a big battle. Since he was putting on a show, he had to do it to the end. Of course, Wang Ling wasn't injured. He had just used the great spell of filth to make himself dirty. This spell wasn't meant to be used in this kind of place, and was only used to make gourmet food. For example, dirty buns. Chapter 1173. After Wang Ling safely returned to number 60 High's camp with the fake Wang Zhen, Super Chen heaved a long sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling reappear. You're finally back, damn. I heard from Nan Yishou that you went to Mist Peak alone to fight Gao Tianming. You're that brave. Did you cheat? Wang Ling. As an outstanding successor to cultivation socialism, Wang Ling had always been too lazy to use cheats as impractical as this. Since he was a cheat, there was no need for him to use it. Wang Ling was worried that he wouldn't be able to explain what had happened just now. Zhuo was naturally prepared for this. He had arranged for a member of the Special Forces, who was on his way to rescue Mist Peak, to deliberately pass above number 60 High's camp. Sure enough, he was intercepted by the students here. Teacher, what on earth happened at Mist Peak? Nan Yishou took the initiative to ask. He felt that it definitely wouldn't be easy for Wang Ling to bring Wang Zhen back. Who was Wang Ling? Number 60 High's mascot with the weakest combat strength. To be able to snatch Wang Zhen back from a lunatic like Gao Tianming, he must have negotiated some conditions. But at the same time, Nan Yishou felt a little puzzled, because it was obvious that this member of the Special Forces had been heading in the direction of Mist Peak, which proved that a big battle had probably taken place there. A student with the surname Gao caused a huge explosion, and all the students that were eliminated, said the member who had been arranged to pass by. All eliminated. Then Wang Ling. Oh, you mean that student with dead fish eyes? He was blown away by the blast of the explosion, and wasn't affected. After saying that, the member directly left on his flying sword. Hearing this, Nan Yishou and the others were suddenly enlightened. Because of the special terrain of Mist Peak, there was an updraft around it, so when people landed around Mist Peak, it was as if they were equipped with parachutes. It was also because of this that Wang Ling had been able to land safely after being blown away by the blast of air, and had even brought Wang Zhen back with him in the end. After sorting out the cause and effect of the incident, Nan Yishou looked at Wang Ling in astonishment. Everyone said that this was number 60 High's mascot. Now that Nan Yishou had come back to his senses, seeing was indeed believing. As expected of Wang Ling. The legendary mascot could really be this lucky. As expected of classmate Wang Ling. Nan Yishou couldn't help giving him a thumbs up as he marveled at Wang Ling's amazing performance. On the other side, Lotus Sun had actually been worried about Wang Ling's condition. Now that she saw him return safe and sound with Wang Zhen, she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She had been especially nervous when she hadn't seen Wang Ling just now, and was even ready to call for the family's personal guards to go into the mountains and search for him. This was a privilege that only Lotus Sun had. Because of Shadow Stream's previous assassination attempt on Lotus Sun, President Chi had in fact approved Wagwa Water Curtain Group's internal personnel to protect Lotus Sunday. Now, these people were actually waiting not too far away. They couldn't intervene in the competition, but they could protect Lotus Sun if necessary. But she actually didn't care too much about her own safety. As long as Wang Ling was fine, she could accept it. Lotus Sun hadn't arranged for these bodyguards entirely out of her own consideration. There were so many students at number 60 high, and as the team leader, she naturally had the responsibility to protect them. As long as you're fine. So, when she saw that everyone was safe and sound, she smiled. Out of the corner of her eye, she looked at Wang Ling's face, which was as tranquil as ever, and felt a trace of peace in her heart. The night of the second day of the national competition passed peacefully with Wang Ling's return. All the major peaks on Nine Dragon Mountain knew that number 60 high had sent a mascot to get rid of Mist Peak's camp, which was led by number 1 Devil Subduing High. While everyone was astonished, they took all kinds of precautions against Fire Peak. Many camps had previously planned to besiege Fire Peak, but all of them had been cancelled. The main reason was that they felt that number 60 high was a little strange. It seemed that nothing good would ever happen to them. In the middle of the night, in the girls' tent, Lotus Sun sensed that Lu Qingyi was a little uneasy. In many cases, girls' minds were transparent, and they could understand each other's thoughts. It's my turn to keep watch. Sitting next to Lu Qingyi with a blanket draped over her, Lotus Sun served her the hot fruit tea that she had prepared earlier. Lu Qingyi stared blankly for a moment, then reached out to take the tea. As she held it in her palm, the fragrant tea leaves gave off steam. After inhaling the sweet aroma, Lu Qingyi felt a lot calmer. Sugar could stimulate dopamine, which could help people get rid of anxiety. The two women sat side by side, hugging their knees as they held the hot tea. Lu Qingyi drank the fruit tea with a heavy heart. Then, Lotus Sun asked straight away, "Are you worried about classmate Wang Jin?" "Of course not." Don't talk nonsense." These words were obviously spot on. Lu Qingyi's face instantly turned red, and even the tips of her ears turned red. "Actually, sometimes, if you really care, you should go and take a look," Lotus Sun reminded her. I just think there's something wrong with Wang Zhen." Lu Qingyi lowered her head with a depressed expression. "After he came back, he didn't say anything, nor did he bicker with me. It's a little strange." Lotus Sun nodded. Even she could tell that classmate Wang Zhen's behavior had become a little wooden, and he was in a daze like a wooden man. Could he have been scared silly by Gao Tianming? "I heard that the explosion at Mist Peak was pretty violent. If it wasn't for the protective golden talisman, he would have been seriously injured." Lotus Sun guessed. Lu Qingyi didn't respond. She was well aware that the whole story probably wasn't that simple. Wang Zhen was thick-skinned and coarse. Lu Qingyi could indeed feel his character from living with him in Wei Ji's house. Actually, after getting along with him for a while, she didn't think he was as annoying as he seemed. This person who had come down from the domain of the gods with the same goal of escaping marriage as her, could even be quite reliable sometimes. At the very least, he made her feel responsible as a man. Emotions had always been a very complicated matter. Lu Qingyi felt that this wasn't something a young girl could understand. There was an age gap between her and Lotus Sun, so Lu Qingyi wasn't willing to share her worries with anyone. But Lotus Sun had hit the nail on the head. As a result, Lu Qingyi gradually relaxed her guard. Maybe she really was too concerned about age. "What does it feel like to like someone?" Lu Qingyi asked in a low voice. "When you like someone, you're always concerned about them and worried about them. Even if they're looking at the sky, you're worried that the stars will fall and hit them." Lotus Sun said to Lu Qingyi as she looked at Wang Ling, who was looking up at the night sky. Chapter 1174. When Lotus Sun said this, Wang Ling was gazing at the night sky. Although she spoke very quietly, he still heard her. The expression on his face didn't change, and he looked a little wooden as he twitched his ears. Wang Ling enjoyed this quiet time very much. Of course, he wasn't looking at the sky simply to gaze at the starry sky, but to prevent the giant meteorites from invading Earth. Late at night, when no one knew, Wang Ling would often observe the movements near Earth. Once he encountered a meteorite on a trajectory that was destined to collide with the Earth, he would use the great sky-gazing spell like he was doing now, and use the power of his king's eye to send it flying back. Thus, when a lot of scientists carried out astronomical observations, they would find that the meteorites that were supposed to collide with the Earth deviated due to the influence of another force of gravity. It was very likely that this was Wang Ling's doing. Wang Ling had been silently maintaining world peace all this time. On the other side, the fake Wang Zhen that Wang Ling had created using Gao Tieming's puppet sat not far away and was also gazing at the sky. Lu Qingyi and the others couldn't see through this level of illusion at all, even if they felt it through skin contact, because this kind of powerful illusion made it feel especially real. Of course, this wasn't without its drawbacks. It was indeed a little wooden. This was because the puppet itself didn't have spiritual intelligence. It could only change its appearance, but not its intelligence. It might be better to use the Great Separation spell to create a clone of Wang Zhen, whose personality would be closer to the original Wang Zhen's, but this way, Wang Zhen's battle strength would be reduced. The enemy that Wang Zhen was about to face could be said to be extraordinarily powerful. If Wang Zhen's battle strength was reduced in this situation, it wouldn't be good for him. So he had no other choice. But what Wang Ling didn't expect was that eldest Miss Lu, who had been bickering with Wang Zhen all this time, suddenly seemed to be concerned about his condition. This puzzled Wang Ling. Their relationship should have been one of hostility and hostility, but now it seemed that it had developed into a more complicated relationship. On the cliff, Wang Ling used the great sky-gazing spell to clean up the giant meteorites that were speeding toward Earth. He got up and brushed the dust off his butt, then left the space for Lu Qingyi, who was anxiously waiting behind him. On the other side, after struggling in her heart for a long time, Lu Qingyi finally sat next to Wang Zhen at Lotus Sun's encouragement. She looked at Wang Zhen's lifeless face, and her heart suddenly ached for him. A good person, how did he become a little fool who was like a vegetative person? Wang Zhen. Lu Qingyi tried to call out, but the fake Wang Zhen didn't respond at all. Wang Ling observed the two of them in secret. At the entrance to the boys' tent, he noticed that Lotus Sun was also secretly watching them from the entrance to the girls' tent. He could see that Lotus Sun's face was clearly a little red, as if there was some envy in it. Dozens of seconds later, Lu Qingyi very naturally leaned her head on Wang Zhen's shoulder in the night breeze on the edge of the cliff. On the other side, Wang Zhen, who was carrying out a mission with Little Silver and Loopy Toad, inexplicably felt a heavy weight on his shoulders, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on them. "Are you nervous?" Little Silver sensed that Wang Zhen's expression seemed especially grave. "A little." Wang Zhen nodded and frowned. In theory, he shouldn't be feeling this heavy. Could it be that this was the first time Ling Zhenren had personally appointed him to carry out a mission, and he was feeling too much pressure? It was the same when I received a mission from Master for the first time. Just relax. In any case, if we really can't solve it, Master will always show up at the most suitable time, Little Silver said. Ling Zhenren, will he really take action? Wang Zhen was a little stunned. He had thought that this mission was Wang Ling's test for him, and he had to succeed. Now that he heard Little Silver's idea, he instantly felt the happiness of having a powerful backer behind him. But Wang Zhen would still take this mission seriously. He represented the domain of the gods. If someone from the domain of the gods couldn't even solve a problem on Earth, that would truly be a disgrace to the domain of the gods. People could have backers, but they couldn't rely on them forever. They still had to move forward step by step with a humble and peaceful heart. You've probably run into very strong opponents in the domain of the gods, right? The three of them sped through the jungle, leaping from tree trunk to tree trunk as they hovered in the air, nimbly using the surrounding terrain to cover themselves. As long as you had the power of Shadow Dao, you could freely use the shadows to hide your figure and even your aura. The power of Shadow Dao is really amazing. The more Wang Zhen felt about it, the more he felt how powerful Shadow Dao was. As a great Dao, Shadow Dao's shortcomings were very obvious, but this was because Wang Yuan hadn't been born yet, so Wang Yuan couldn't control Shadow Dao very well. However, the advantage of Shadow Dao was even more obvious. It could strengthen one's shadow and turn it into combat strength, so that it could catch the enemy off guard and injure them in battle. I have a feeling that our enemy will be very strong, Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. As far as it knew, Wang Ling had never asked them to individually strengthen each of them before carrying out a mission. This proved that Wang Ling had a feeling that the enemy they were going to face would be very troublesome. I know. Wang Zhen nodded solemnly. So far, this mastermind behind the scenes had resurrected a number of people who were already dead, including vicious dark network criminals as well as vengeful spirits of the dead who wreaked havoc in the dark. Their current understanding of the other party was indeed very limited. Resurrection definitely wasn't the other party's only ability. If the other party also has Shadow Dao, what kind of ability would it be? Wang Zhen suddenly asked a question worth thinking about. We won't know until we meet him. Little Silver and Loopy Toad were also worried. Because they didn't know the other party, they didn't know what on earth would happen next. I have a guess, Wang Zhen said at that moment. Let's hear it, asked Loopy Toad. Bringing the dead back to life is a heaven-defying act. There's bound to be a price to pay for using such a forbidden spell. The other party has resurrected so many people, logically speaking, it's impossible for him to be completely fine. Makes sense. But in other words, if the other party is really fine, then there's actually only one other possibility. Wang Zhen frowned. This person might not be from the same dimension as us. Or perhaps he's from a different universe. But Wang Zhen felt that there was actually a loophole in this explanation. Because if the person behind the scenes was someone from a different universe, as the keeper of order, how could Gu Shunji not sense it? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.